happen. Councilmember D'Amico? Did it work? Yes. CJ, can you tell me? You might have to do the security thing on the... CJ can help. And then if you need the... WPA, whatever that. And then bring it up.
Good evening, everyone. It's 6:03, and it is May 16th, and we're going to call this meeting to order. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather, and that is currently known as the City of West Hollywood, is the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrieleño Tongva and Gabrieleño Kizh peoples. And now we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. Karen Ayers, will you lead us?
Please place your right hand over the heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Karen. Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Thank you. Councilmember D'Amico.
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson.
Present.
Councilmember Horvath.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Shine.
Present.
Mayor Meister.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great. Do we have a report of the closed session agenda? Madam City Attorney?
Yes, hi, good evening. The City Council convened a closed session at 5:30 this evening. There were no members of the public signed up to speak. The City Council discussed the two items of existing litigation and took no reportable action. The meeting finished at 6 p.m. this evening, and that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we will move to approval of the agenda. First, does staff have any changes?
Yes, Mayor, staff is requesting that item 4A be tabled.
Okay, we'll table 4A. And for the public, 4A is, I'm going to find 4A. It is about inclusionary housing.
4A is the small projects affordable housing in lieu fee update.
Thank you very much. And does anyone else have any changes? Councilmember Erickson?
Let's see what I can do. I'll start in the fives. I wanted to see if we could move 5D. It's a parking mitigation measure for the Melrose Avenue Streetscape Project, Phase 2. Okay, I'm going to keep going. 5C, levy of annual assessment for Santa Monica Boulevard Maintenance District fiscal year 2022-2023. I'm going to keep doing this, Mayor.
Yes, keep
5B,
going. You're on a roll.
consideration of the annual report of the Advisory Board of the West Hollywood Design District and adoption of a resolution of intention to levy. All right. 5A, consideration of a report of the Sunset Strip Business Improvement District.
Okay.
May I keep going?
I think you should just, you're on a roll.
All right, I'm on a roll. 4D, the certification of a training organization to provide public housekeeping training.
I have some comments, but I can do it during my, or if it direction, I could do it during my council member comments.
Sure.
Everybody else, so you're okay? Okay. I'm seeing head shake.
Maybe we could do 4C like we did last time with David Wilson's update for the WeHo Pride aspect, where if we had any questions, we could do it under that section. I don't think Jeff is here. Well, he'll be on
4C.
Zoom,
He's on Zoom.
I'm sure. And then I'm going to try one more. I'm going to cross my fingers. 4B, the housing element.
I have a lot of questions on 4B
Okay.
still. So, and 4A, we have tabled.
4A is tabled.
Yep. Yeah, that was tabled by staff.
I'm completely fine with that one.
Which one, I'm sorry?
5E.
5E.
Yep. 5E?
Yes, and I'd like to pull from consent items 2W and 2Z, please.
Okay. 2W, and can you tell us what they are, just so?
Yes, of course. Item 2W is Sacramento Legislative Action Day for appointed officials, and 2Z is the resolution to initiate local cultural resource designation proceedings for 7900 through 06 Santa Monica Boulevard.
Okay. So we are going to pull 2W and 2Z, and we are going to table 4A, and we are going to move to consent 4C, 4D, 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D, and 5E. Did I get it right? Okay. All righty. Do we have a motion? We do. Mayor Pro Tem, second by Councilmember Horvath, and now we have Councilmember D'Amico, and we have, okay, whatever. The important thing is we have an agenda. Councilmember Erickson, you're voting no on the agenda? You don't want an agenda? Okay. Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Shine, did you vote?
Oh, there we go.
All right, so we have an agenda approved 4-1. And now adjournment motions. Do we have any adjournment motions? I see Councilmember Horvath.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to adjourn in memory of Urvashi Vaid, who was a longtime influential attorney, LGBTQ activist, whose career spanned from the early days of the AIDS epidemic to contemporary battles over equality and equity. She was a brilliant, passionate, and brave leader who was not afraid to speak radical truth to power. She always stood up for the LGBTQ community, for Black, brown, and Asian communities, was an advocate for women's rights, anti-war efforts, immigration justice, and many other social justice causes. Intersectionality was her work. Her loss will be felt in ways we don't even yet know in terms of the leadership that she has offered for so many in our community and beyond. I'd also like to adjourn in memory of the deaths resulting from mass shooting in Buffalo. On Saturday, May 14th, 10 people were killed in a racially motivated mass shooting at Tops grocery store in Buffalo, New York. The shooter traveled hours to target the Tops Friendly Market store in a predominantly Black neighborhood.
The victims, all of whom were Black, included 4 grocery store employees as well as 6 customers, several of them regulars at the store. Roberta A. Drury, age 32, of Buffalo. Margus D. Morrison, age 52, of Buffalo. Andre McNeil, age 53, of Auburn, New York. Aaron Salter, age 55, of Lockport, New York. Geraldine Talley, age 62, of Buffalo. Celestine Cheney, age 65, of Buffalo, New York. Hayward Patterson, age 67, of Buffalo, New York. Catherine Massey, 72, of Buffalo, New York. Pearl Young, 77, of Buffalo, New York. And Ruth Whitfield, age 86, of Buffalo, New York. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, I thank you, Councilmember Horvath, for talking about the victims of the racial domestic terrorism in Buffalo. I also would like to adjourn. We don't know the name of the victims yet, but closer to home in Orange County in Laguna Woods, a gunman shot dead 1 victim and injured 4 more at a Taiwanese church before being apprehended by community members and tied down until law enforcement arrived. And I just want to expand on Urvashi's adjournment. I'm just going to read a bio from the Advocate that was printed, which was really, really well done. She was a graduate of Northeastern University School of Law and Vassar College, began her career as a staff attorney at the National Prison Project of the American Civil Liberties Union, where she initiated the group's work on HIV and AIDS in prisons. She spent 10 years at the task force in various positions. The LGBT task force, National LGBT Task Force. In 1990, as its executive director, she made a statement at President George H.W. Bush's speech on AIDS with a sign that said, "Talk is cheap, AIDS funding is not." Her critique made waves, disrupting the press conference and shedding light on the failures of the Bush administration. Her time at the task force saw her bring all aspects of queer life and struggle into the public eye, the group's press release notes. She co-founded its Creating Change Conference, now in its 33rd year. She was executive director of the Arcus Foundation, a global funder of LGBTQ social justice and great ape conservation from 2005 to 2010. She was deputy director of the Governance and Civil Society Unit of the Ford Foundation from 2001 to 2005 and served on the board of the Gale Foundation from 2004 to 2014. In 2012, she launched LPAC, the first lesbian super PAC, and it has since invested millions of dollars in candidates who are committed to social justice through legislation. She was most recently president of the Viad Group, a social innovation firm that works with global and domestic organizations to advance equity, justice, and inclusion. She was co-founder of the Donors of Color Network, the first cross-racial network connecting individuals of color to leveraging their giving for racial equity, and of the National LGBTQ Anti-Poverty Action Network, the National LGBT HIV Criminal Justice Working Group, the Equality Federation, and National Religious Leadership Roundtable. She was a leader in the development of the current ongoing LGBTQ Women's Community Survey. She had been senior fellow and director of the Engaging Tradition Project at Columbia Law School's Center for Gender and Sexuality Law, exploring how tradition-based resistance inhibits projects to advance gender, sexual, and racial equity. Before that, she was senior fellow at the Social Justice Sexuality Project at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. She was also an award-winning author and researcher. Her published works include books, reports, articles, and columns. For several years, she was a columnist for The Advocate. She authored the books Irresistible Revolution, Confronting Race, Class, and the Assumption of LGBT Politics in 2012, and Virtual Equality, the mainstreaming of lesbian and gay liberation in 1996. She co-edited an anthology with John D'Amilo and William Turner titled Creating Change, Public Policy, Sexuality, and Civil Rights in 2000. In Virtual Equality, she criticized the idea of mainstreaming what was and is in fact a civil rights movement, the task force press release notes. Rather than tolerance, she argued the objective for the movement should be fundamental, actionable change. It was not an immediate popular notion, as media representation for queer people was just beginning to take shape, though it was for her of great moral importance. Virtual Equality won the Stonewall Book Award in 1996. She has been such an incredible lesbian pioneer. She was the aunt of activist and performance artist Arok Vaid Menon, who survives her along with her longtime partner, political humorist Kate Clinton.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Erickson? Okay. I have one. I'm sad to say that we need to adjourn in memory of Michael Poles, who passed away on April 17th. Michael was an active community member and West Hollywood resident for many years. He was a photographer, and he was also a construction consultant, collaborating with architects, engineers, contractors, and other technical experts. In the early 60s, Michael was also a corpsman for the U.S. Navy Reserve Hospital Corps, and he volunteered with several veterans groups after his service was done. He is survived by his wife, Linda, and a daughter. He will be missed, and we send our deepest condolences to Linda and the family. Okay. Next, we have presentations, and I believe Councilmember D'Amico, you have a presentation.
I do have a presentation, and I wonder if Xander is joining us.
Hello.
Hi. Xander, good evening. Thank you for joining us. When I read about you last week, I think over the weekend, 8 or 9 days ago, I was so inspired. And so we have prepared this proclamation, and we will make sure that it gets to you. And for those who don't know, Xander is currently a senior at Pineview High School in Osprey, Florida, and is the first openly gay class president at his school. He's the youngest public plaintiff in the Don't Say Gay lawsuit against Governor DeSantis and the state of Florida. And despite opposition from his school principal, Xander recently organized a walkout against the Don't Say Gay law, in which hundreds of students joined, making it the largest school walkout in Sarasota County. He's the executive director of the Social Equity and Education Initiative, which is a student-based effort to oppose this legislation and the hate behind it. And the Social Equity Education Initiative has created over 10,000 Say Gay stickers that will be shipped to high school seniors across Florida to wear on their gowns on graduation day in protest of those who preach selective freedom. And I just wanted to make one other quick statement, Xander. When I saw your story on Twitter, I immediately knew that I wanted to reach out on behalf of this West Hollywood city government to acknowledge and celebrate your fearlessness. You know, our city was invented by fearless people about 40 years ago, people who were unable to get the government to actually see them. And it's shocking that your own government is trying to erase you. And when people ask if I have any advice for younger gay men, I always answer that I have no advice except go out and invent the world you want to live in. And clearly you're doing that. It gives me chills to think about. And finally, you know, all governments are not equal. In fact, like the pigs in Animal Farm, some pigs are more equal than others. And this government sees you. We see you right now, live. There you are. And we celebrate you. You're standing up, and your future will certainly be bright. Congratulations, and we'd be honored to hear a few words from you.
I want to start off by saying thank you to all of you. Today was my first day back at school for a couple of days, and it's been pretty difficult. There's more security, people are worried, people are upset, and they're angry because their graduation is under attack and my rights are under attack, and it's stressful and it's scary. And knowing that I would have this community of support just entirely across the other side of the country kind of pulled me through today, and it was amazing. So thank you, honestly, because you're right. It's refreshing and it's different to have a government come out and say and support what is right, because this is not just about me. These are First Amendment rights, and we cannot allow a human identity to become controversial or political, because then we are saying that human rights are debatable, and they're not. Human rights are not debatable. My rights are not up for debate. No one's rights are up for debate. And when we allow that to become a valid political opinion, we're accepting this as a part of our everyday lives. And it's not everyday life for a group of human beings to be invalidated and to lose their rights and to be silenced. And so to have a government come out and say that, and to come out in opposition. And I was actually talking to my friend right beforehand, the way that you are able to cleanly and clearly address what is going on in the country and acknowledge that there are racially motivated attacks and that racism is spawning violence and that ignorance is a problem. The fact that that's something that you can address as a government should not be refreshing, and it should not be great to see, but it is. And so I'm grateful for that. Right? Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me a chance to speak, because that's really what this is about. We just have to keep pushing against this legislation. We cannot accept this as a part of our lives, and we just have to keep trying to be better. And thank you, because this has given me a lot of hope about what a government could look like.
Well, happy graduation. Thank you very much, Xander.
Thank you, Xander. You're an inspiration, really. Thank you so much. And now we're going to move on to public comment. The City Council values your comments. However, pursuant to the Brown Act, Council cannot act on items not listed on the posted agenda. The public comment period is limited to 20 minutes, although we may go a few minutes longer, with 2 minutes allocated for each speaker. This public comment period is to address the City Council on consent calendar items, other agenda items if the member of the public cannot be present at the time the item is considered, or items of general interest within the jurisdiction of the City Council. Another period is also reserved for general comment later in the meeting for those who could not be heard at this time. Public hearing testimony will only be taken during the time of the hearing. So I see we have a few speakers, and we will start with Vivian Gumbiner. Vivian, do you want to speak later on in the evening? Because we will be hearing the item. Sure. And you want to speak into the mic. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vivian Gumbiner, and I'm representing the owners of the property located at 7900 to 7904 Santa Monica Boulevard. We learned of this proposal about perhaps making our building historic a little over a week ago, so we've not had too much time to prepare for tonight. My family has lived and or worked in West Hollywood for over 60 years, and we've had a strong connection with the city of West Hollywood. We are a mom and pop business, and our goal has always been to have good tenants who attract desirable businesses to the city. We've been a good steward of the building. We are opposed to having our building declared historical. There's nothing historic about the building or its architecture. In fact, it is a run-of-the-mill commercial structure. The fact that the building was constructed decades ago does not justify historical significance, saying that as a person of my age. The interior of the building is mostly basic modern offices, and the building is topped by 2 billboards and a cell phone tower. This issue has come up in the past, and a 2016 study stated that there is nothing significant about the building. In addition, while we have had wonderful tenants, we have not had noteworthy tenants from a historical perspective. The desire to have our building declared historic seems to come from a citizen who is very fascinated with the clock that is on the corner of the building. This clock has not worked since before West Hollywood was a city, and we could not find anyone alive who recalls when it actually worked. The citizen contacted us about repairing the clock, which is a very difficult and expensive project. Prior to the pandemic, we received a couple of bids to repair it, but we were not confident the work could be done correctly, including a bid that came from the citizen's friend. Then the pandemic hit, and like everyone else, we were hit hard, and our building was mostly empty. We could not continue getting bids during the pandemic for obvious health reasons. We do intend to fix the clock and can now concentrate on finding a repair person who can do the job correctly and ensure it will run properly for a long time. Lastly, this consent motion refers to 7900 through 7906 Santa Monica Boulevard. I'd like to ask if the owners of 7906 have been notified of the proposal prior to the vote tonight. That property does not belong to us. It is a different building.
Thank you.
So it doesn't seem appropriate to vote on something if the owners have not been notified.
Thank you.
Thank you very much
We'll
for
be
your
discussing
time.
this later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Renee Sodal, followed by Karen Ayers.
Hi. I'm actually Renee Sotil, lesbian and gay advisory board member and longtime West Hollywood member. So thank you, Mayor Meister, Mayor Pro Tem Shine, Council Horvath, D'Amico, and Erickson, City Manager and City Attorney. This sure combines two things that I love, astronauts and cats. And I'm here in support of item 2V, Trap, Neuter, and Return Program. Taking care of our community cats is important to myself and my wife. About 11 years ago, a beautiful, skinny calico and her kittens appeared in our yard. This is when we learned of the feral cat population in West Hollywood and began our journey to help them and our neighbors with trap, neuter, return. TNR is a commitment, and in the days and weeks it takes to lure the cat safely in a trap, you are emotionally invested. After the neuter, you learn the sex and general health and age of the cat, and you see the ear tip, which is a universal sign that a stray cat has been fixed. And now it's time to return. When the cage door is lifted, the cat slinks out cautiously or darts out, and it's uncertain if you will ever see her again. But the cat came back the very next day. Oh, the cat came back. We thought she was a goner, but the cat came back. It just couldn't stay away, away, away. Thank you, in memory of Janie, the beautiful calico who lived in our yard and hearts for 10 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Renee. Karen Ayers.
Hi, Karen Ayers, City of West Hollywood. Good evening, Mayor Meister, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. I'm here to speak in support of item 2V on your consent calendar and to support community members like Renee and her partner MJ, who have taken it upon themselves to help control the feral cat population here in the city of West Hollywood. And I'm glad that the city council has this on their consent calendar to expand a program that is really right now bare bones for these community members to take this upon themselves requires a lot of effort on their part, not just to have the patience and the knowledge to trap the feral cats, but to get them into the valley, and I'm talking about into the valley, to get neutered and then bring them back to their environment where they feel safe. What this measure will do is help make things more local for them, make it easier for these community leaders to do what they want to do. And Renee has said that there are people who want to do this, but it's too much trouble. Well, this just might tip things in their favor. I know that this has been a long time coming for Renee and MJ. They've been wanting to get this service expanded to a more local program for more than 10 years. And I thank Councilmember John Erickson and Mayor Pro Tem Shine for taking this on and really putting a practical measure into place so this can be done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. Gunter Kunoki, do you want to speak now or do you want to speak later when we hear the item, when the item is discussed?
I'm a brother now.
Now, okay.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Günther Koenicke. I'm a professional engineer and have lived here for 16 years in West Hollywood. A long time ago, when I was driving on Santa Monica Boulevard, I always saw this beautiful clock on the corner of Fairfax and Santa Monica Boulevard, but it never worked. So I took it upon myself in February 2015, mind you, more than 7 years ago. I made it my own personal project to get this clock fixed. I have a lot of communications with the manager of the building as well as the owners, the Gumbiner family, I believe, but they were totally reluctant to do anything, especially since this is an expense, a maintenance expense which is tax deductible, but I could not convince the owners of the building to do anything about it. Then at one time, I was offering to go to the GoFundMe page in order to raise the funds ourselves and get this clock fixed. But the Gumbiner family was totally against that, of course, because of the possible exploration and the publication of their unwillingness to do it by themselves. I also found a email today that was sent by the City of West Hollywood, and it states here, that being said, we do intend to fix the clock, but we have encountered a number of difficulties in repairing it because the mechanics are buried deep inside the building, which is not visible means of access, and the clock needs to be rebuilt internally. This is erroneous. There is no internal mechanics inside the building. The entire mechanics are inside the clock itself. And the contractor, a very good Englishman, which is very experienced in these type of clocks, told me that with a scissor lift, they can work on the outside, don't even need to take the clock down, and fix it in place.
Thank you, Gunther.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Genevieve Morrill, to be followed by Steve Martin.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. It's great to see you in person. Genevieve Morrill, President and CEO for the West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. We've been waiting almost a year to meet in person so that we could present and honor Pride a year later. These framed Pride Lives Here posters from 2021, 1921. From 2021, I'm way back in the day. And Melissa has 5 of them for each of you, and I've been waiting to give them to you in person, but we want to thank you for hosting Pride again this year. The business community is very excited about it. We did our best to get as many people in the float in the parade as possible. So we want to thank you for all you're doing to support Pride and the business community in that. I also wanted to, there are also compliments, by the way. They didn't cost us anything. There were compliments of Beverly Hills Framing, which used to be called WeHo Framing, and it used to be located on Doheny and Santa Monica Boulevard in that historic building that's been empty since they left. So anyway, it's Beverly Hills Framing. They did a compliment to you for Pride. And then I'm pleased to announce on behalf of the Sunset Strip Business Improvement District, which we serve as executive director, that we are putting a roller rink, skating roller rink up on the Strip from June through August as part of Summer on Sunset in partnership with the West Hollywood Visit West Hollywood Travel Tourism Board. And so we hope you'll come join us. We'll have 3 months of fun skating and a lot of incentives and different programming within each of the venues on Sunset Strip to try to bring some life into those venues. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Genevieve. Steve Martin, to be followed by Wes Siegmiller.
Steve Martin, West Hollywood. Yeah, I can tell you that 1921 Pride was great. Anyway, I wanted to thank you for 2V. We just had an abandoned cat that was just had his ear notch kind of wander into our yard, and he's now part of the family. But it's only because someone went to the effort to fix him. He did get abandoned, but it's great, and thank you for appropriating this money. I also wanted to speak on 2Q, the Beverly Triangle. You know, they're asking, the consultant's asking for another $55,000. You know, it looks like we've put $250,000 into this so far, and we don't seem to be moving in a direction that has a lot of consensus. So maybe you guys might want to pull this and talk about maybe a timeout, and maybe pull back with the Public Facilities Commission, and maybe use staff time rather than consultant time to really kind of sort things out, because it just seems like we're getting nowhere fast. Also, I would like to ask the city manager if he could give us an update on when we're going to be opening up West Hollywood Park. I know we were all expecting to have the great dedication in April, which would be exciting. I had heard rumors that the pools were leaking or there was some sort of structural damage. If that's true, I would just really be great if the city would just say why we're not opening it and what the nature of the problems are, so we can kind of realistically assess when this is going to happen. I mean, everyone's looking forward to it, and it is a big project that's been through a long time. So anyway, thank you very much, and thank you, David, in advance.
Thank you, Steve. Wes Siegmiller.
All right. This mic still doesn't work, huh? Okay. Hey everyone, my name is Wes Siegmiller. I want to address the public of West Hollywood directly, as well as everyone watching at home. Again, my name is Wes. I'm a member of the Free WeHo Coalition. We were founded to be a part of the global movement to fight back against vaccine passports and medical segregation in the spirit of the historic, peaceful French picnic protest movement, where peaceful protesters set up picnics outside of French diners in peaceful protest of medical segregation. So the Free WeHo Coalition has been hosting integrated events for the last couple of months. We've had a couple of really fun community picnics. We had an integrated club night last month, which was hecka lit. It was so fun. And this Saturday, the 28th, so Memorial Day weekend, Saturday the 28th, we're having a beach day. So come on down to Will Rogers Beach, affectionately known as Ginger Rogers Beach, and come join the LGBT health freedom community, and come hang out with us. We're a fun group of people. We're from all political walks of life. Everyone is welcome. All ages, all political backgrounds, no matter your vaccination status or not. So you can find out more about us at freeweho.com. Thank you. Hope to see you there.
Thank you, Wes. Azar Elihu?
Hello, council member and city mayor. My name is Azar Elihu, a resident of West Hollywood. A couple months ago, I heard in the news KNX that the city of West Hollywood will approve another 800 permit for cannabis dispensaries in West Hollywood. I heard that on KNX, and the resident, my neighbors, everyone is very concerned that a city with like 36,000 people population, whether they have any more room for additional dispensaries. And we are concerned, and we'd like you to not approve this permit, hopefully. With the surge of crimes in the city of West Hollywood and the effect that cannabis can have on younger brain, we are very concerned, and hopefully these permits will not be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we have council member comments.
Mayor Meister?
Oh, I'm sorry, do we have?
Yeah, we have several individuals on Zoom.
Oh, okay.
Our first speaker this evening is Samuel Shaya, followed by Michael Vojkolevich. Samuel, you'll have 2 minutes to speak. Please press *2 to unmute yourself. Samuel, you'll have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Terrific. Hi, everyone. My name is Samuel Shaya. I represent the ownership at 8797 Beverly Boulevard, also formerly known as the Coffee Bean Building, which I think everyone has gone by. We have a 40-year presence in West Hollywood, and we've really been witness to the incredible positive growth that's taken place in WeHo in the last 40 years. I'm speaking with regard to item 2Q, to voice my concern on behalf of our tenants. This proposed change to the hardscape and area that is on the Beverly Boulevard side of the building is somewhat of a concern because it proposes, as you can see, to remove the parking there. That is something that is greatly in need, primarily for the doctors in the building that have handicap access patients that need access, and most of them access the building from that side. But also a bigger concern is, as you know, formerly we had Coffee Bean as a tenant there. One of the reasons they left was actually because of the transients collecting and getting together around the bus stop area and then overflowing onto their outdoor seating. This would essentially provide more areas for the homeless and transients to gather. That is a concern that is voiced on our behalf as well as our tenants. Furthermore, the proposed art installation there not only blocks the appeal to the building, looking at the building from the Beverly Boulevard side, but again, does not seem to be very conducive towards a safe environment in that area. We know that the artists went out to the community to get their input, but as ownership and on behalf of the tenants, we never got any phone calls to see what that would look like because we are a critical component and a part of this community. We take great pride in that. Again, we've been a part of this community for 40 plus years, and we look forward to a great partnership moving forward, but we would really like to ask that the council re-look at this proposed modification to the front of this portion of the building. Thank you.
I have a question, Mayor, for the public commenter.
Sure, go ahead, Councilmember.
If you are still on, Samuel, you said that no one reached out to you and that you've not been able to provide any input. Is that the case? I just want you to reiterate that.
Sure. We were able to provide input via the meeting, but in the write-up under 2Q, it states that the artist had reached out to community members, and I'm not aware that anyone on the ownership side of that, both from our group as well as the adjacent property which houses Leica, was spoken to.
Mayor, maybe we can pull this item to have a further conversation then at the end to talk to staff about that.
Yeah, I actually had comments that I was going to make on that item, so.
We pulled it. Did we pull it?
No.
No, why don't we pull it then?
Or you can just make comments during.
No, I think we pulled some other items, so we can pull it.
We're going to go ahead and pull 2Q.
And then we put a lot of stuff on consent.
I'm sorry?
We put a.
Okay.
Is that all, council?
Thank you, Samuel. Our next
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
You as well. Our next speaker is Michael Voikolevich, followed by Adam Darvish. Michael, you will have 2 minutes to speak. Please press *6 to unmute yourself.
May I start?
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, good evening, Michael Voikolevich, City of West Hollywood. While this evening's agenda originally had 2 items scheduled, 4A and 4B, where both city staff and council members probably hold trust the broader general public will blindly believe and accept each item somehow tackles the ongoing housing crisis, tonight's agenda is absent anything which addresses the greater humanitarian epidemic that has been allowed by politicians alike at local, state, and federal level. The still growing, but already out of control societal epidemic of those unhoused. And yes, the homeless crisis is not the same as the housing crisis. The industry instruments that have caused a shortage in housing across the board are not the same as the myriad of factors, whether singular or in combination of one another, which cause homelessness. Again, As this council approaches the midpoint of 2022, with less than 1 month away from a statewide primary election, tonight's city council agenda is a reflection of the regrettably allowed mindset of current career politicians, as it has nothing which addresses the growing number of lives not only unhoused, but not welcomed in West Hollywood. Lastly, Council Member D'Amico, maybe take your eyes off of Florida for a moment, as you have fragile, vulnerable human beings continuing to live, age, and battle the inhospitable nature of those more politically and socially connected on the streets of your city. Furthermore, you, sir, along with your colleagues upon the dais, past and present, your city staff, including advisory board members and commissioners, in addition to the assortment of city contracted providers paid with public monies, have made a mockery of the rights for disabled Americans, which were federally recognized more than 30 years ago. It's time to...
Thank you, Michael. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Adam Darvish, filed by Lynn Russell. Adam, you will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. Adam Darvish, a resident. Good evening. Mayor Meister, Mayor Pro Tem Shine, council members, staff. I am calling tonight in support of item 2S. The only thing I'm asking is for more residential streets to also be a focus. I believe this item is about in-road flashing lights, warning lights for crosswalks, and some of our residential streets, as you're aware, have no crosswalks for residents to walk their dogs, who just cross the street. And as you all are aware, many drivers are speeding in our residential streets after midnight hours, keeping residents up with spinning tires and all of that. So that's to just thank you, and please keep that on the agenda. Maybe look at speeds at all the residential streets and the accidents that are going on. The second comment that I have a general public comment about racism in the U.S., something we all have to acknowledge and talk about. I myself, as an immigrant, that I've talked about how I was profiled, I was almost killed in Syracuse at my first Christmas Eve dinner. That I thought was a joke. It was not a joke because of my national origin. And also, first job interview at Rutgers University, job fair, technology company, representative that looked me in the eye, and after he asked me where I was from, told me that I would not have a chance in this country. So again, it saddens me to see 40 years later a young 18-year-old killing 10 Black Americans. So it hasn't gone away. I know we've done a lot, and a lot has changed for the better, but I think we need to look at at all levels, from DC to the state level to the city level, and fix it. Our government also has racists in it, and I myself could go on about FBI and immigration officer that profiled me back in 1979. But thank you for all that you do and the focus that you have on eliminating racism. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam. Our next speaker is Lynn Russell, followed by Mary Jo Godges. Lynn, you'll have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Mayor, it appears Lynn is not with us right now. Mary Jo, you're our next speaker. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. You'll have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Hello, good evening, City Council. This is MJ Godges, WeHo citizen, and I'm also calling in support of item 2B. When a mother cat showed up in our front yard with her kittens, I didn't know what to do. I recognized her as the pretty kitty that followed me when I walked up the street. It was then I realized what was up with this odd behavior for a cat. She was a stray and needed help. I called the local veterinarians to get her spayed, but they all said they wouldn't see a feral cat. I researched this. The Humane Society reports that female cats can become pregnant at 5 months old. They can have 2 to 3 litters a year with over 100 kittens in a lifetime. This is a terrible, painful existence. Now I understand the source of the cats howling and crying in the middle of the night, and actually saw what it meant when they say the fur is flying. My wife and I knew we had to act fast with this mother cat. By the time we got her to Stray Cat Alliance to be spayed, Janie was already pregnant again. This was 11 years ago. She lived the rest of her life peacefully, but not before we had to trap the male. 3 black and white cats, all looked related. Another hair-raising endeavor, but we knew if we didn't do it, we'd soon be seeing dozens of more feral cats. Plus, they were still attacking Janie. Word got out to other neighbors with feral cats that we were experts, but that's hardly the truth. We just mustered up the courage because we didn't have a choice. One elderly neighbor on Huntley Drive had a colony of 13. They also were black and white. She was desperate, so one pre-dawn morning, I found myself driving to Bix Nation in Sun Valley with an SUV full of cats in cages. So, on behalf of your feline citizens, we thank you, City Council.
Thank you. Mayor Lynn Russell seems to be on. Lynn, if you can hear us, you have 2 minutes. Press *6 to unmute yourself. Lynn, if you can hear us, please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Why don't we move on and...
She was our final speaker, Mayor, on Zoom for public comment.
I believe we have 2 more. Kevin Meskin.
Hi, Kevin Meskin. Yeah, I want to start attending this meeting regularly, and it's good to see my friend John D'Amico up there. I remember when you were like 2 terms, but I support your choices, and I love my city, and I think we have an awesome community here, and we need to make sure that we're here to support the city. And John said good things about you, Lindsay, so I support your goals, but I hope you're also committed to the city that I love so much. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Abdullah Hall.
That was quicker than expected. Hello, everyone, City Council members and Mayor Pro Tem Shine. My name's Abdullah Hall. I'm here on behalf of SLAY Model Agency. We are doing an event on the 16th of June with co-sponsorship from the City of West Hollywood, bringing trans identity, TGI identity in fashion and entertainment. We'll be inviting plenty of the community people out here like Trans Latina Coalition, Unique Women's Coalition, APAIT, Transcourse Los Angeles, and everybody else in the TGI community to show fair and equal representation of the trans community here in West Hollywood. So I just wanted to come up with that support, and thank you all for your co-sponsorship, and I'm so excited to see you all. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have Lynn Russell on the phone, or? If not, we can save it for the end of the meeting. The second public comment, okay. Let us move on then to council member comments and meeting attendance reports. Mayor Pro Tem Shine, you'd like to start?
Thank you, Mayor. Since our last meeting, I was a guest on the LGBTQ talk show called The Q Agenda on LATV. The episode will air at the beginning of June. I also attended the farewell lunch for former Captain, now Commander Ed Ramirez, as well as for Public Safety Director Kristen Cook. I participated in our East Side Community Cleanup event, which had a really great turnout. I also attended this past week from Wednesday to Sunday the annual Contract Cities Municipal Seminar in Indian Wells, which was absolutely wonderful, and I learned a lot Our next community cleanup event will be Saturday, May 21st on the west side at 9 a.m. We will be meeting at West Hollywood Park. More info will be released beforehand, and I encourage community members to come out and join us to clean up the streets and residential streets and commercial streets of the west side. I want to let everyone know that I have been invited by a wider bridge to participate in their LGBTQ Pride mission in Israel this summer. No taxpayer money will be spent on this trip. I will be out of the country from June 7th till June 22nd for the Pride mission in Israel, as well as a family wedding in Athens after. Regarding consent calendar item 2S, which is the agreement for services to install in-roadway warning lights on Sunset Boulevard, San Vicente Boulevard, Crescent Heights Boulevard, and Doheny. Thank you for staff for moving this forward, especially with regard to installing the warning lights on North Crescent Heights and Norton. It is so dangerous to cross there, and so many residents have, for many years, been afraid to cross this crosswalk, and many have reached out to me since I've been on council, so they're going to be very happy to learn that they can cross more safely. Regarding item 2V, expanding West Hollywood Trap Neuter Return Program, so much has been said by public comment tonight. I'm so happy to have worked with Councilmember Erickson and staff on this much-needed program for our cat-loving community. With regard to item 5D, thank you again, Councilmember Erickson, for our work together on this for the Slay Models Management event. This is the first model management company that has represented all trans models, which is breaking another barrier and helping to break barriers for trans folks. That's much needed. And so unfortunately I will not be able to attend. I'll be out of the country, but I fully support this obviously, and I encourage community members to attend. Due to the many events happening this month and through June, as well as me being away, my next Sips with Seppi neighborhood coffee meeting with residents will be scheduled for July. I was so absolutely enjoy seeing the result of our new City Hall Pride mural this last week. I was actually in tears looking at some of the pictures of the artist with her wife creating Our Pride, which features 4 hands to symbolize aspects of LGBTQ equality and activism. The first hand is in a rising fist shape, symbolizing the fight against oppression throughout history. Next, a painter's hand symbolizing LGBTQ creativity and openness as a community. A hand holding a sunflower comes next as a symbol for self-love and seeking light. And finally, a hand in a classic peace sign. The background color is a gradient bright blue sky, symbolic of the progress the LGBTQ community has made and will continue to make. Each hand is painted as a realistic representation of the diverse people of our communities. Latoya D. Peoples is a BIPOC, queer, multidisciplinary artist, educator, and entrepreneur working in the realms of visual art, public community, arts, and design. Her focus on figuration, natural elements, color, and pattern as a way of exploring identity and history. She carries these themes over to her mural and sculptural installation work, creating transformative pieces guided by youth and community engagement. I'm just so excited about this. Our Pride will be on display through Sunday, April 30th at West Hollywood City Hall, and I encourage you all to go check out this incredible art. And I'm so glad that Councilmember Erickson and I worked together to bring forward this item last year that went through our RFP process and had so many submissions. And thank you to our Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission on such an incredible, thorough job, and to staff. Next week, West Hollywood is celebrating our first ever Pet Week. Pet Week is an initiative brought forward by Mayor Meister and I to highlight our animal companions and celebrate the joy that they bring into our lives. West Hollywood is often recognized as one of the most animal-friendly cities in the nation, and the city has a long history of supporting measures that promote the protection of animals and animal rights. All week, West Hollywood Recreation will be highlighting community members' pets on social media on @WehoRec. You can email your pet picture to recreation@weho.org to be highlighted on their social media. In addition, the city is hosting a virtual panel on Wednesday, May 25th at 5:30, featuring holistic vets discussing their practices and holistic remedies. Mayor Meister and I will be moderating that. And on Saturday, May 28th, we will once again welcome the Vanderpump Dog Foundation's World Dog Day at West Hollywood Park from 11 a.m. to 4. The event will feature vendors, food trucks, puppy adoption, special performers, and other activities for you and your four-legged friends. More information on these events are available on the city's calendar at weho.org. I do want to ask the city manager to please update us on the WeHo Park Playground and the ARC building and progress to opening both of those. And I would also like to have the city manager or staff let us know for clarity for a public commenter, how many cannabis licenses we have approved and how many in total are remaining to be approved. I would also like to know if we have had any crimes as a result of our cannabis businesses or the use of cannabis bought from our cannabis businesses. I think that's a very important stat to let the public know. With regard to Pride, I want to thank the Chamber for your work in getting folks into the Pride, so thank you for that, and everyone else who really pulled together to help us get over 100 entries. It's going to be an incredible Pride, and I'm glad the community is going to be coming together for it.
Thank you. Councilmember Horvath?
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to recognize and congratulate Genevieve Morrill, our Executive Director of our local Chamber of Commerce. I saw through a recent social media post that over the past couple of years, she's been recognized with several awards, including the Judy Erickson Backbone Award from BizFed, the Moving Mountains Award, also from BizFed, and the Hero Award from the Chamber Board and staff. So I wanted to congratulate Genevieve on all of these well-deserved recognitions. Yes, that's much deserved. Since our last meeting, I attended, at the request of our mayor, a meeting with the LAUSD new superintendent to hear more about his 100-day plan and to hear more about his vision for LAUSD. He's very eager and interested to work more closely with local governments, which was exciting to hear. He has great ideas about how we can partner together, and so I think it's the start of a beautiful relationship. I also attended the California Contract Cities Association Executive Board meeting and part of the annual municipal seminar, easy for me to say. I want to thank our staff, and I also want to thank especially Mayor Pro Tem Shine for her organization skills after our last meeting to pull together our Roe v. Wade press conference that several of us were able to attend. I know the mayor was there, and of course Councilmember Erickson was working behind the scenes on a very busy day. But on the whole council was well represented, the whole community was well represented, and I'm glad that we were using our voices on this issue. I also want to thank our staff for supporting the multiple events that we had in honor and recognition of Victory Day. While we're having difficult conversations about international conflicts today, it was important to recognize our history, so we remember our history and we're not doomed to repeat it. And I want to thank our staff and all the community members who came out to participate. And finally, I was recently contacted by a local publication regarding our communications policy and local publications. I believe our city manager had a conversation about that, but if you could just clarify if we're going to be moving forward with a communications policy or where that stands. I know there was some confusion, and so I just want to make sure that for the record we're clear about how we're working with local publications. Thanks.
Councilmember D'Amico?
Thank you, Mayor. I have no comment other than I also attended the Contract Cities Municipal Government on seminar on Friday. I saw the Catherine Barger and Supervisor Catherine Barger and Supervisor Hahn speak. It was very exciting to imagine someone of equal quality sitting up there talking about what is possible in the 3rd District. And so I wanted to say that the county is a very complicated place, and Contract Cities always reveals that to me, that it's made up of so many cities with so many different points of view and so many complex problems that overlap, compete, and often don't collaborate as much as they could. And so that's an important organization, I think. I was glad to be there, and was glad to have heard from the 2 supervisors. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Erickson.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. I too want to just remind everyone to vote. Voting has begun. I still have not voted for many reasons in my life. It's still sitting there. But if the city clerk at some point could maybe give us an update on the voting center and how that will happen in West Hollywood, because I know that's where a lot of people drop off their ballots or go to vote. Going along that way, I also do want to congratulate my colleague on her much-deserved LA Times endorsement that highlighted the work that she has done here in West Hollywood on homelessness, housing, public safety, you name it. You don't see a local city council member taking down 2 senators from Sacramento without having the credentials to do so, and the credentials to show that they get results. So much deserved, and congratulations, my friend and my colleague. I also want to congratulate my dear friend Kimberly Essingler, who received her MFA in poetry today, and I cannot be there. Otherwise, I would be there cheering her on in Long Beach from the stage with her wife, Marie. Cannot wait to celebrate with you this Saturday. In meetings that I have attended, I attended the NLC seminar, Solution on Resources to Addressing the Housing Crisis, the SCAG annual meeting and General Assembly, the community cleanup on the East Side. Thank you, Steve. We picked up some garbage together back there, and everyone else that came around. The Red Cross Sound the Alarm event, which was incredible, and it was great to see them go into our community to help people. The panel discussion to the Victory in Europe Day. The LA County 3rd District Consolidated Oversight Board. I did attend the Human Services and Public Facilities Commission meetings because they were the first in-person meetings, and I wanted to thank them for their service. I attended the NAMI Town Hall on mental health that the city co-sponsored. I did get a sneak peek of the Woods walkthrough. I was not able to attend the fun one that got all the fun stuff because I was busy opening Planned Parenthood's brand new health center in Inglewood, but I was so glad to see it well represented. I too attended Contract Cities in the annual conference. I also want to thank my colleagues for all activating so quickly on the Roe v. Wade news, from the press conference to this past weekend's Women's March rally. It's an honor to serve with all of you and know that we stand very strong as a city to say we won't go back. I also want to thank the fire department and sheriff's department for responding to a literal dumpster fire. I see you, Mr. Green, trying to make the joke, but it is Monday that I was awoken to this morning at 7 a.m. They quickly reacted and were there to put it out. No idea how it was caused. I live on Fountain, so I would be really curious to see how someone could quickly do that on Fountain at 7 a.m. But nevertheless, they responded very quickly, to which Winnie woke me up out of bed very eagerly to make sure I was aware. Additionally, I do want to take a personal moment to thank everyone who's reached out for my mental health, knowing I work for Planned Parenthood and the stress that has caused my colleagues and that I work with, as well as everything that we're doing. It really means a lot to see the care that this community has for that issue. So thank you. A couple of items for staff. I'm really appreciative of the Willoughby-Ogden diverter, but if you're following Twitter, you're seeing a lot of cars just blow through those street signs, and it is fairly dangerous down there. I do know it is a joint partnership with LADOT and us, and while I know LADOT can be difficult to work with, I would love to know some solutions to make sure that we get possible potential more enforcement, because if you watch it, if someone were to step off, it would not be good for them. Additionally, I have been several members of the community have reached out to me from the hotels regarding a ZTA that I believe we unanimously passed more than 6 months ago to change their conditions to have special events like pool parties and other things to change their conditions. And I don't know the status of that ZTA or when that's coming back, but code does go out there and follows the rules that are on the books, but they are not able to do certain things because of those conditions that we did say we wanted to remove. So would love to get a timeline and potentially expedite that. It is summer, so people are out there trying to spend time by a pool. Additionally, I want to let the public know my next Plummer Park event will be on May 28th. I will make it to World Dog Day after at noon. Don't worry. This is the 10th event that I've done in Plummer Park continuously. So great. Renee, I'll see you there, hopefully. And that leads me to items on the consent calendar. 2V, I do really want to lift up and thank Renee and MJ for never giving up on this issue, as well as other members of the community. Renee came and spoke to me. I know she's spoken to several of us, and we've all tried to take action, as well as Danny Rivas and our code compliance staff for really never giving up on this issue. And so thank you very much for your advocacy. I'm allergic to cats. Otherwise, I probably would have one. But thank you, Renee. It's nice that our feline friends are going to be taken care of. Additionally, I want to thank my colleagues for item 2X, the climate dashboard, as well as going along on a psychedelic trip with me on 2Y with mushrooms and what we'll be doing there. And then also we'll talk about 2W and 2Z at a later time. Thank you so much, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Erickson. So since our last meeting, I represented West Hollywood at Southern California Association of Governments Annual General Assembly meeting in Palm Desert. Councilmember Erickson was there as well. I attended several ribbon cuttings, one for the Salon on Doheny, one for the Woods, and one for the grand reopening of AKT, and also welcome guests to Mayski's Classical Night, which benefited Ukrainian refugees. And I thank you, Eugene, for bringing that forward. On item 2I, guaranteed income pilot, I'm glad to see that we're finally moving forward. Sorry that we aren't able to target it as much as we wanted to, but if anyone has any questions, they can reach out to Diane Kahn-Epstein on that. Item 2J, 2022 WeHo Pride LGBTQ Arts Festival update. I just want to remind everyone that 40 Days of Pride begins on Harvey Milk Day, and there is a reading Harvey this Sunday, I believe. Maybe staff can just confirm that. And then item 2Q we'll be discussing later. Item 2X, Climate Action Dashboard. I just want to thank Councilmember Erickson for bringing forward that item. I think it'll be very exciting for us to be able to actually see in real time how our policies are impacting our climate. Then on item 2Z, we pushed that one for later. We pulled that. Let me just look to see what on item 4C, the WeHo Pride update, if staff could please talk about public safety. I know that there were some questions about that from the public. And then on 5D, parking mitigation, I was just wondering, there are several businesses on Melrose that have parking that is not used on weekends. They have parking lots just off Melrose, and maybe we can see if we can use any of those parking lots temporarily as we lose some parking spaces. I want to go back to 2S and the warning lights and just say I'm very excited to hear about Doheny and Elevado and Doheny and Cynthia. This has been a concern of residents since before 2003. and the fact that we were finally able to work with the city of Beverly Hills, which is on the other side of Doheny, to get this to be a reality is just extremely exciting. One announcement, 2022 West Hollywood Youth Scholarship. Pleased to announce the recipient. August Vigneault will be graduating from Hollywood Senior High School and plans to attend Temple University, the Japan campus, to pursue a bachelor's degree in psychology. August loves basketball and hopes to work in sports psychology in the future. August has performed 150 volunteer hours with West Hollywood Teen Center, working with kids around the West Hollywood area, participating in park cleanups. We have another one coming up. Event fundraisers and organized sports gatherings. The City of West Hollywood recognizes the importance of education and volunteering in the community and supports local students interested in pursuing their education beyond high school. The West Hollywood Youth Scholarship awards $2,000 to graduating high school students who are West Hollywood residents and have completed 150 hours of community service. The program is funded entirely by donations from individuals in the community and local businesses. To support funding the program, please visit weho.org and click on the Youth Scholarship Program page to donate. And now, also I want to just note my no vote on item 2E for the reasons that I provided at our last meeting, and move on to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. Luckily, you put a lot of items on consent because
Is your
it's gonna
mic
be a
on?
long update.
Is your mic on?
How's that? Yeah. Just a few general updates first. This Thursday, May 19th at 9 a.m. Will be the Budget Subcommittee meeting. It's for the fiscal year 2022, 2023, and 2023-2024 budget. It will be a virtual public meeting that will be live streamed on youtube.com, on the WehoTV channel, and on Zoom. Some more information can be found on the city's website, on weho.org, under council agendas. We are finishing the grinding and removal of the pavement, striping and markings on Fountain. This evening, the installation of the new striping and markings began through May 26th. And then we'll give several updates from staff via Zoom to some of your questions, so we'll do that in a few minutes. Regarding the cannabis businesses, in 2017, we adopted an ordinance that allows 40 cannabis businesses. We have approved the license for all 40 of those businesses. They are spread throughout the city. There is not more than 19 locations because some businesses have multiple licenses. And some have opened and some have not opened yet, the newer ones. Staff is not aware of any serious crime, but we will check with the Sheriff's Department regarding any crime. I don't want to commit to that, but we are not aware of any serious crime at any of the locations in West Hollywood.
So it's not 40 businesses, it's 40 licenses.
40 licenses,
Okay.
yes. Centers, we'll talk about the communications policy. So that is under our communications department. Generally, the communications department follows the communications strategic plan that was adopted by the city council several years ago, but we are working on an administrative regulation that lays out and documents the city's policies on advertising and other things. So we'll have that done in the next couple of weeks or month or two. We'll do Harvey Milk Day is, let me open my text message. Yes, yeah. So we will have virtual stage readings featuring an all transgender and non-binary cast, which will be available for viewing starting on May 22nd for the whole week. And I believe the actual date is Sunday. And there is the Dear Harvey play. And to go through my list, regarding the parking mitigation plan, so there will not be construction in the evenings and the weekends. So when those businesses are closed, there wouldn't be construction. But the additional free parking that we're allowing in the parking structure, so there's an additional hour in addition to our hour that we provide now. So people could park their constituents for 2 hours without paying, which usually is enough time to for most business transactions or reasons they're there. And I think that was all on my list. So I'm going to have the city clerk talking about the voting center, and then we'll go to Zoom and we'll have Steve Campbell talk about the WeHo Park update. John Kehoe will talk about the ZTA for hotels, and then we'll have the update for Pride from our event staff, from Megan Reith, along with Bill Mulder, our acting captain, will talk about safety. And before we do that, I did miss one. So the Willoughby traffic diverter, so in late April, the roundabout and curb extensions and traffic diverter was installed. It is on the border of West Hollywood and Los Angeles. It is actually in Los Angeles, and the traffic is sent to Los Angeles. But we have received complaints, both the city of West Hollywood and LA City Council District 5, and both seem to agree that enforcement is the biggest problem there. So, and both, we will be working with LA City and our Sheriff's Department regarding enforcement as the initial phase, and then decide if there needs to be any changes to the diverter itself.
And since it is in LA City, perhaps LAPD, which has a very large budget, could handle the enforcement aspect, because they have a larger police budget than some countries. So, thank you.
And I won't speak for our Sheriff's Department or LAPD, but certainly on the LA side, they will. And we'll help from the Sheriff's side as well in West Hollywood. And so now I will turn it over to our city clerk.
Thank you, City Manager Wilson. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members, the city will host an 11-day vote center at Fiesta Hall. The vote center will open on Saturday, May 28th through Election Day on June 7th. In addition, we have 3 permanent drop-by-mail drop boxes, or vote-by-mail drop boxes. They are located right outside of council chambers on San Vicente, outside of the community center at Plummer Park, and on Sweetser next to City Hall, or behind City Hall. What I would like to share with the public is for Pride weekend, we will still allow access to the vote-by-mail drop box at the community center, but we will also have directional signage letting people know that the vote center is actually on Vista at the Fiesta Hall rather than the community center, since we will be utilizing part of that space. We have done outreach to our Disabilities Advisory Board and Senior Advisory Board, and one of the things that we have updated on our elections page at weho.org/elections is accessible voting through the VSAP program, which is Voting Solutions for All People. Accessible voting is a big part of that, and that's why particular outreach was done to those advisory boards, because they're able to do accessible vote by mail, which the rest of us aren't able, and I really wanted to highlight that for them. Any member of the public who has questions about the June 7th primary, feel free to reach out to me. My email is mcrowder@weho.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And so now we'll go to the Zoom for the update on Plummer Park from Steve Campbell, followed by John Kehoe with the ZTA, and then we'll have the Pride update.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Very happy to share with you tonight that the city did receive its temporary certificate of occupancy for the building, which means we're able to get staff into the building, and they're in there on a daily basis almost now. Our lifeguards are training and certifying in the pools. We've got folks setting up offices and doing other items of, getting ready for programs, et cetera, within the building now. We hope to have our official certificate of occupancy either later this week or early next week. We still have a few more weeks of training that we need to do to get all of our new lifeguards certified in the pools, et cetera. And once we have all those items in place from a staff perspective, we will kind of start our phased opening with limited access to the pools and limited access to the gymnasium towards the end of the month or beginning of June. With respect to, I believe Mr. Martin made comment, so leaks in the pools, those leaks are very common in an installation of this type where it's a liner-based, suspended, essentially, pool. And all of the leaks have been associated with penetrations either for pipes or stair rails or those type of things. And those have been chased down and repaired. We have a very good contractor, subcontractor that did the installation of the pools, and they've been working with us very closely to get all of those items detailed out and finished up. It's not structural in nature. It's just it's common with an installation, especially with our deep competition pool where there's a lot of extra pressure in there. So those things can happen. The playgrounds, if you have been by the park, you've probably seen a lot of activity, substantial in nature with respect to repairing the items that were found to be deficient with the installation. The city took possession of the playground, I think 2 weeks ago, and we have brought in a separate contractor under the guidance of the manufacturer to make all of those corrections and get everything kind of dialed into the way that it needs to be so that it's safe and usable for everyone for many years to come. We do expect that work to take a few more weeks at least to get everything buttoned up and then recertified for use as required by statute. So if anyone has any particular comments or questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Do you have an update on the playground? Did you say that?
Yes. Am I not coming through?
Okay. Could you reiterate it again? Because I completely spaced then.
Okay. The playground was taken over by the city 2 weeks ago. We've had our own contractor in place doing some very substantial work, and we expect that to take a few more weeks until everything can be kind of put in the way that it's specified to be put in. We're working with the manufacturer and their contractor to make sure that everything's been done absolutely correctly. Any other questions?
Thank you, Steve. And now, here's John Kehoe.
Good evening, everyone. So I'll talk real briefly about the activities at hotels, primarily in the residential zone. So these would be the hotels located in residential areas. So we do have, the ZTA is in our work plan. We're hoping to get to that item later this summer and into the fall to change how the approval process would be for hotels who want to do activations at their hotels to provide additional activities and services for their customers and for people who aren't actually at the hotels. In the meantime, people can apply for a limited number of special event permits for pool parties or whatever they may want to do differently at the hotels. And then there also is a current zoning regulation that allows them to apply for a CUP to make it permanent. But that CUP is what we're trying to change. The item is scheduled for later this year. We're hoping to get through our ZTA changes for the out zones before we get to that, as we want to make sure we get the out report zones taken care of, since those are all temporary activities. So that is where we are. Hopefully we can get that later this summer and into the fall.
So what options are available to these hotels and their contractors? I mean, I know they can only get one special event permit a month?
So I believe that's one a month, yes. So they can, the regulations of the ordinances right now say that you can apply for a CUP, but that does take a process. So takes time for that one to go through a process.
So
and that's what we'd be hoping to change.
So if any member of the public that's reached out, we can direct them right to you, and you can kind of walk them through the regulatory process. Great.
Yes.
Thanks.
Any other questions for John Keogh? Seeing none, we can move on.
And so now we'll have the Pride update.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council. We are here this evening with a final programming update for you ahead of the inaugural WeHo Pride Weekend to be held June 3, 4, and 5. On Friday, June 3rd, the weekend will kick off at 5 p.m. with Dyke March to be held at the community stage on Robertson. The Dyke March will be followed by the Women's Freedom Festival in the same location. And the Women's Freedom Festival and Free Street Fair will go until 10 p.m. on Friday night. And Out Loud, the Raising Voices concert, will be held from 4 p.m. until midnight in the park on Friday. On Saturday, the free WeHo Street Fair will be held from noon to 10 p.m. and Out Loud will take place from noon to midnight. Women's Freedom Festival will be hosting a family day in Plummer Park on Saturday, June 4th. And on Sunday, the inaugural WeHo Pride Parade will be held on Sunday, June 5th. Step off at Santa Monica and Crescent Heights at noon, and KTLA will be hosting a broadcast special from Santa Monica and San Vicente from 1 p.m. until 3 p.m. Also on Sunday, the free WeHo Street Fair will be held from noon until 10, and Out Loud will take place from noon until 11 p.m. on Saturday. At the last council meeting, we provided the update that following a very successful application process, 50 community groups have been allocated space inside the WeHo Street Fair, and to date, nearly $107,000 in funding has been allocated to community groups and organizations to either produce their own events or to amplify their presence in the WeHo Pride Street Fair. A list of those separate events being funded and produced under the WeHo Pride umbrella will be publicized once the organizations have finalized their plans. Up-to-date information will continue to be available on weho.org/pride as updates become available, and Acting Captain Mulder is here to provide a public safety update regarding the weekend, and Jeff Consoletti, principal of JJLA, is here as well. Staff is also available to answer any questions you have.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, city staff, and members of our community. So the Sheriff's Department's Emergency Operations Bureau is providing deputy staffing for the 3 days of the festival and then the parade on Sunday, and managing all community safety issues for these particular events. And we don't give out specific number publicly for tactical reasons and for operational integrity. And also the City of West Hollywood, the Sheriff's Station, will also enhance staffing over the weekend for patrol operations and any issues outside the festival or the parade, as events going on in bars, clubs, restaurants, hotels, or other Pride weekend events. I'm looking forward to a safe and fun weekend and encourage people to come out and celebrate. Thank you.
Jeff, do you have anything to add?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. We're very excited for our inaugural WeHo Pride June 3, 4, 5. As you know, the city is sponsoring an entire season of Pride events, but we really want to continue to invite the community to kick off Pride Month during WeHo's Pride Weekend, June 3, 4, 5. There are lots of prides happening in Greater LA this year, as we know, and we're very excited to be the first. I really want to thank each of your offices and the West Hollywood Chamber and business community. Obviously, the incredible team at City Hall, our events team and public safety team and communications team. We've really been working, triple time, quadruple time on messaging and awareness. We have street teams that are activated throughout West Hollywood and the business community for the past several weekends. So you'll notice a lot of signage out in the community. I really love the creative look of the street banners and digital advertising that you're seeing. And that's thanks to the city's comms team for really supporting us there. From a public safety standpoint, JJLA runs large-scale events all over the country, and especially coming out of the pandemic as well. We're working with 3 dedicated security providers to amplify what's being provided by the West Hollywood Sheriff's Department to keep our communities safe. That's both particular to the Out Loud Festival itself, but also the West Hollywood Street Fair, as well as an added presence along the parade route on Sunday. As you're aware, we are returning to the city's medical triage tent at San Vicente and Melrose. This has been standard procedure at our previous large-scale events in West Hollywood pre-pandemic. We're working with LA County Fire and a festival specialist medical supplier that helps to ensure that anyone who might be injured in and around the festival and being out in the community over WeHo Pride Weekend will be seen efficiently, and that'll be maintained throughout the weekend. We open that medical tent 2 hours before the event begins and keep it open as long as necessary in the evening. We are working, you'll notice just a couple other notes on marketing. We've really been amplifying a secondary theme with Pride Starts Here. So WeHo Pride starts here June 3, 4, 5, and we look forward to welcoming everyone to West Hollywood. I think Meg gave a great overview of all of our schedules. So hard to believe it's coming up in 3 weeks, but thanks again to everyone for the collaboration.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. All right. If there are no questions.
I have a question. Okay, so I'm wondering, are we working with block by block in any way and incorporating them into the security protocols? I know that we had an item, I don't know if it's coming back before or after what the contract situation is, to increase kiosks and presence. So I'm wondering what our collaboration with block by block is during this weekend.
I'll speak to the item and coming back, and I don't know if there's anything that Bill or Jeff want to ask regarding Pride itself, but the item for block by block itself, we are increasing the budget for next fiscal year, so we'll be bringing a contract back in June, probably the first meeting in June. That increases that contract to add the additional kiosk and foot patrols and those things, but those wouldn't start till July. I'm not sure if we have any plan right now to include them in the actual Pride security. So I don't know if Bill or Jeff, if you have any.
There wasn't any plan for supplemental street teams from block by block that I've been communicating with. That had come up early in the season, but I think it was because there wasn't a contract in place.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe for the next Pride, it would be great to get block by block involved the next year. So
Okay. And just one last update. The last community cleanup in our series will be May 21st. Saturday. Yes. So we are still looking for volunteers. So anyone interested in helping, it will be in West Hollywood Park. Please go to weho.org/volunteer.
And I think play ball is on Saturday as well, so that you can
They'll
you
be
can
our
come
volunteers.
and clean up when the mayor gets hit by a ball, a softball.
You working on your wind up, Mayor? I think you throw the opening pitch, yeah?
I think so. Okay. So if that's the end of our city manager's report, we're on to fiscal impact of the consent calendar. Madam City Clerk, what is the fiscal impact with the addition of 4C, 4D, 5A through 5E, and the removal of items 2Q, 2W, and 2Z?
Thank you, Mayor. The fiscal impact with the removal of the items indicated and addition of items indicated is $2,586,788 in expenditures, $180,975 in revenue, and $3,760 in waived fees.
Thank you. And we need to approve that, approve the consent calendar. I see Councilmember D'Amico with a second from Councilmember Horvath, and waiting for my vote. Okay. Motion passes 5-0. And
noting the no vote of Mayor Meister on item 2E.
Yes, thank you so much. And we are going to take an 8-minute break before our public hearing, which is item 3A. We'll be back in 8. Okay, we're back. And we are on item 3A, which is a public hearing. We will now hear public hearing item 3A, zone text amendments to Title 19, zone ordinance and Title 20 subdivision regulations of the West Hollywood Municipal Code to allow certain properties in the R1A and R1C zone districts to subdivide their properties and construct up to 2 dwelling units plus accessory dwelling units as already authorized in accordance with recently adopted state law SB 9 and finding the action statutorily and categorically exempt from CEQA. The public hearing is now open. Are there any disclosures from council members?
I attended the community meeting, informative community meeting, several months back, where community members were able to provide input to, I think, Rachel and all of them, but I've driven the neighborhood and that's about it.
I'm sure that'll be discussed during the staff report. Madam City Clerk, how is this hearing noticed?
As required by law.
Okay. Will the staff representative please introduce yourself and present the staff report? Where is our staff? Online. On Zoom. Okay.
Good evening, council, members of the community. My name is Rachel Diamond. I'm a senior planner in long-range planning at the city. And tonight before you, we are going to discuss zone text amendments related to SB 9. Just bear with me for one moment. Thank you. So a little bit of background on SB 9. It was adopted by the state legislature in August of 2001. And in September of 2021, the bill was signed into law by Governor Newsom. The law went into effect on January 1st of 2022, so it is in effect today. On January 20th, the Planning Commission recommended approval, but when we went back to council, we recognized there was a noticing error that did occur. So prior to coming back to City Council and to Planning Commission, we did hold a community meeting on March 3rd of this year, and then went back to Planning Commission on April 7th of this year, where they recommended approval of the proposed zone text amendment. A little bit about SB 9. It basically allows single-family lots to be subdivided into 2 lots as long as the lots are larger than 1,200 square feet when subdivided, so a minimum of 2,400 square foot existing lots can be subdivided. And it allows every single family lot, with some exceptions, to have 2 dwelling units on it. So an existing single family lot could have 2 dwelling units on it, or a lot that is subdivided could then have 2 units on each of those subdivided lots. There is an ownership occupancy requirement when you do subdivide the lots. And per the state law, there is no parking required for these units in West Hollywood based on our proximity to transit. Because this applies to single-family lots that are true single-family lots that only allow 1 unit on them, this only applies to the R1A and R1C zone districts in West Hollywood. And there are a number of conditions that would exempt lots, and that would include any historic sites that are landmarked, or any lots that are utilized as rental housing over the past 3 years. As I said, SB 9 is in effect today. So basically all of the things that are allowed by SB 9 are already allowed in the city of West Hollywood, but we do not have any local regulations in place to facilitate the use of SB 9 in the city. There's absolutely no requirement to build any new units in the city, but what SB 9 does allow is for additional units to be built should an owner choose to do so. We have only had 1 single phone call of interest related to SB 9 and to properties that this applies to, but we have not had any applications submitted. Should someone wish to submit an application today, like I said, there aren't local mechanisms in place that really clearly outline what we would require. So it's really important that we have something on the books in our zoning ordinance in order to give us the outline of what we need to do to allow for entitlement of additional units per SB 9. A number of cities have tried to circumvent state law through historic designations, through environmental designations, and as a result, the state attorney general did respond pretty strongly with a number of letters to municipalities. We did include those in your packet just for reference. I know there has been a lot of conversation of ways we can get around these requirements, but ultimately the state has been very strong-handed in messaging to municipalities stating that they do need to comply with the intent of SB 9 and move forward with these types of enabling ordinances. As I said previously, there is an allowance in this regulation for urban lot splits, so a new section would be added in the subdivision regulations that would basically allow for lots that are 2,400 square feet or greater to subdivide into 2 lots, as long as the minimum is 1,200 square foot each. The maximum split is 60-40, so you can't have one very giant lot and one very small lot, so it would be 60%, 40% at most. And when you do an urban lot split, you are required that the owner occupy one of the units on site for a minimum of 3 years after the application is submitted. The resulting lots can be sold separately, but the units on each lot cannot be sold separately. So if you build a duplex, that duplex is owned by one entity, so one portion could be rented out potentially. As far as 2-unit projects go, there is another section that was being added to the zoning ordinance to lay out all the requirements of having these 2-unit projects on these single-family lots. Per state law, it does need to be a ministerial review, which basically is similar to our accessory dwelling units and requires a zone clearance. And so basically you can have 2 dwelling units, including an accessory dwelling unit and junior accessory dwelling unit when you subdivide the lots. But if you're not subdividing the lots, if you have an existing single family lot and you're not subdividing it, you would be able to do the 2-unit project, the 2 dwelling units, plus an ADU and a junior accessory dwelling unit. FAR is not changing. It's still going to be 0.5 FAR for all of these sites, but state law does require that that municipalities allow for a minimum of an 800 square foot unit. That's what's guaranteed by state law. So if a property is over on FAR, they would still be allowed to build an 800 square foot second dwelling unit. Setbacks will maintain as required, but we will not, the regulations would not require a specific distance between units or between urban lot split resulting lots, and the building code would basically govern that requirement. There's no required second floor step back, and as I said previously, no parking required. This is something that we can't get around. It's very specifically laid out in state law that parking can't be required for these types of units because we meet the threshold for proximity to transit services. As far as access goes, there would be direct access to right-of-way required or an easement, meaning that you wouldn't necessarily have to have street frontage for each individual lot, but could have an easement to be able to access that right-of-way. I already discussed the own your occupancy, and then, like I said, as far as conveyance, 2-unit projects have to be owned by one entity and cannot be sold separately. There would be required separate metering for each unit. So what does this mean? This has a lot of details about the different types of situations that you could have, and I won't go through each one, but ultimately, basically you can have up to 4 units on existing lots, whether you subdivide them or you have 2 dwelling units plus the ADUs. So there's a number of different ways that this could come about. And again, I just want to reiterate that this doesn't mean that this is the end result for every single family lot, but this is what is allowed today. And so no one is required to build additional units. They just have the ability to do so under this change in state law. There are 3 areas of the city that this applies to. In R1A, the northwest corner of the city has 6 lots that this applies to on La Colina Drive, as well as on West Doheny Road and one on Sierra Alta Way. There's also an entire block of North Greenacre Avenue that includes 34 existing lots with a single family home on each of those lots. And then Betty Way, which is zoned R1C and has 13 lots with 14 dwelling units. We did receive quite a bit of community input, as you can see from the staff report, but I did want to touch upon our community meeting that we had. We don't typically have community meetings for these types of items, but per council direction, we held a community meeting that was very well attended, and we did receive a number of concerns, not only from the community meeting, but from letters that we received from community members A lot of the concern was about change in character, historic preservation, overcrowding, utilities, and separate metering. In summary, SB 9 is in effect right now, and I think it's really important to continue to clarify that, because these regulations are already in place, and we really need local regulations in order to implement SB 9 on a local level. The state is not allowing cities to circumvent this law, as I discussed earlier, and we're getting a lot of pressure from the state to ensure that SB 9 is being carried out rather than worked around in some way. Again, lot splits and additional units are voluntary and not required, and this zone text amendment would really align our zoning ordinance with the adopted state regulations, and as a result, staff is recommending adoption of the ordinance in front of you on first reading. With that, I'll open it up to any questions. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. I have a number of questions. First of all, how long does the state give us to incorporate these laws into our zoning code? For instance, I know that there was, the one that from several years ago that Planning Commission recommended had a recommendation. We still haven't seen it, and it's been 3 years. So, do they give us an actual timeline?
There is no timeline specifically to adopt a local ordinance in this case.
Okay. Can I ask why this is being applied to Betty Way when virtually all the lots don't meet the square footage? Because you had in your report, it's got to be at least 2,400 square feet, and from what I understood in the report, it's 12 out of the 13 lots were 2,000 square feet, and there was only one lot that was 2,500 or something like that.
Sure, so there's two pieces to this ordinance. One is the subdivision of the properties, which, like you said, most of the properties on Betty Way don't qualify for. But the other piece of the of SB 9 is allowing the 2 units on each site. So that does apply to Betty Way, regardless of the size of the lot. They would be allowed to add a second unit.
Okay, but that's a second unit, not 4 units. If it was split.
A second dwelling unit plus an accessory dwelling unit and a junior accessory dwelling unit per existing state law.
Okay. Is there anything included in what you're proposing that isn't specifically required by SB 9? For example, does SB 9 require a second story for R1C Betty Way?
SB 9 does not require a second story, and our local regulations aren't changing with regard to height. So Betty Way and that district are not, the height limit isn't changing.
I thought that Betty Way was I thought Betty Way was 1 story, no?
Betty Way is 1 story and will remain so.
So you're not allowing us for a second story on Betty Way properties in this zoning?
No, the only way that someone could ask for a second story is if they felt that the only way to add an 800 square foot second unit was to add a second story, or that there were no other, that the development standards wouldn't allow them to do so in any other way.
Then how would they do that? Through a variance?
They'd have to ask for special permission through the regulations. It wouldn't be a variance specifically.
Okay, I'm not quite clear on that, but how are we going to make sure that compliance with SB 9 in terms of who's living on site? Isn't that a requirement?
We'll require an affidavit by the owner, particularly for the owner occupancy requirements. They would be required to submit an affidavit that they intend to live in one of the units for 3 years when they submit their application.
And how do we check for compliance on that?
We certainly can check in with them at any time, but don't have any standard compliance procedures for this.
And are there consequences for not abiding by the occupancy law?
They would be in violation of the Subdivision Map Act and also of our subdivision regulations. So it's certainly something we could, potentially prosecute. But ideally, we'd want to gain compliance and get someone to be occupying the unit.
But we're talking about the owner.
The owner, yes, of course.
Okay.
But yes, they could be taken to court.
Okay. And will these new units be under rent stabilization?
That is a question I'd like to defer to the city attorney, actually.
I don't believe they're rent stabilized because rent stabilization applies to buildings like built before a certain year. So if we're talking about new construction of units, I don't think rent stabilization would.
Is that something, though, that we can put on this?
That's right. State law dictates the year that rent stabilization can apply to buildings.
Okay, so these can be very expensive units, is basically what I'm asking. And then my last question, and then I'll open it up to my colleagues. I'm sorry, thank you for bearing with me. I don't really understand why this is exempt from CEQA when there have been, discussions about parking issues, utilities, infrastructure, and importantly, the historic cultural resource issues on Betty Way and Green Acre. So why aren't we studying this to make sure that there aren't historic or cultural resource issues that could affect those streets?
So as far as the historic resources on any of these streets, we've done surveys of the entire city that include those blocks, and there have been no properties on Greenacre, on Betty Way, or in the northwest corner of the city that have been identified as potential resources in the city.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Shine?
Thank you. You indicated that SB 9 is already state law since January, so it's been 4 months. And just to clarify, did you say that you've gotten one call from an interested party in the 4 months? Can you further elaborate why we are deciding this today? And since this is state law, basically, again, why are we deciding this today? What's the importance of that?
Sure. So basically, our regulations don't speak to the type of procedures that we're required to have per SB 9 for these types of projects. So if someone came in today with a single family home and wanted to add a second unit on their property, our regulations actually state that they need an administrative permit, or in some cases a development permit for larger projects. And that's actually not the procedure that we're required to have per state law. It needs to be a ministerial review. So we need these regulations not only to have our own local details on how to make this work, but very specifically the procedures that we need in place in order to allow someone to make use of SB 9.
Is this giving us in a way, a little bit more local control over, unfortunately not, but a little local control over what we decide tonight?
It's basically, like I said, giving us the ability to lay out our own local process. So yes, it's giving us the ability to kind of fill in the details of SB 9 in the only way we can.
Thank you. I want to ask you a further question based on the mayor's question to you about, you said that for a second story on Betty Way, rather than a variance, there would be a special permission through the regulation. Can you explain that a little bit more so I can understand what exactly you mean by that?
Sure. So the regulations require that a second unit of up to 800 square feet be allowed regardless of our development standards. And so basically, if someone felt like our setbacks or FAR or in this case height were stopping them from being able to build an 800 square foot unit, they would need to get permission to deviate from those standards. I believe it's the Planning Development Services Director would make that call. So for example, if someone said, I have a single family home on Betty Way, I'd like to build a second unit, but the only way to do so is to build a second story, we'd likely say, well, you have the backyard, you have the side yards. We'd probably want them to build out on the ground floor before we'd even consider allowing a second story. And in almost all the cases, they'd be able to do so by doing that instead of a second story. So there's generally a way to avoid even granting that request.
Thank you. That explains who it's actually going to be going to. Can the neighbors or, for example, the WeHo Preservation Alliance be able to do an application for cultural resource designation or cultural district designation now, and also if whatever we end up voting afterwards, would they be able to still do that?
Yes, this would not stop anyone from making an application for a cultural resource designation now or in the future. And should that occur, then these regulations would not apply to those properties.
Okay, thank you. Oh, no, I have another question. Again, a follow-up. With the prosecuting, if the owner is not occupying, would code compliance be involved in that? Or would,
yes, for example, there was a complaint, code compliance could investigate that complaint for us.
so if someone said, the owner is actually not occupying this, code compliance would get involved. And do we have administrative code compliance regulations, and maybe Lauren Langer might be able to answer this, for them to actually have the enforcement mechanism they need?
Let me look at the code, because some provisions are misdemeanors and some provisions are subject to the administrative citation section, so I can look.
Thank you.
Councilmember Erickson?
Thanks, Rachel. So you're saying that if no one on any of these streets wants to do this, they don't have to?
That's correct, yes.
It is 100% completely optional.
Yes, absolutely.
A developer cannot come in and just all of a sudden say, oh, we're going to do all this, correct?
Yes, it would need to be the owners that are applying for these additional units.
John, when SB 9 was up in the state, I think last year already, we had a conversation about how SB 9 was already essentially allowed under our code to a point, but because SB 9 was made a ministerial permit, that's generally why the city council, just for the record, was in opposition to that, because we we usually do not support legislation that takes away local control. Can you explain how SB 9 was already essentially allowed under our code, but there were some caveats that, complicated it just a bit?
Sure. Most of the areas in West Hollywood that most people seem to think is zoned for single family is actually zoned R1B. So West Hollywood West, Norma Triangle, and a few other areas are zoned R1B. So a lot of people think that because something has the title R1, that means it's single family zoning. So the majority of those areas are, all R1B areas are already zoned to allow for 2 units on the property. So they already can, someone can also already take a lot in WeHo West or Norma Triangle, and if they wanted to, build a duplex on the property or build 2 houses. And then in addition to that, they could also comply with the state requirements for ADAs and build, I believe it's up to 4 units. So essentially, all the R1B areas are already zoned for what SB 9 is doing. And so we just have a few, I think it's approximately, maybe 50 lots. It's a very limited number of lots that are subject to SB 9. And as we've all been pointing out, Norma Triangle, those lots are already so small, it's probably pretty unlikely that someone would want to take those lots and build additional units on it. In actuality, SB 9 is trying to create streets that are more like Betty Way. So Betty Way is kind of what SB 9 is thinking about. So it's already built.
And John, doesn't it also, the R1B zone wouldn't allow for the subdivision of the lots?
That's correct. So in R1B, you can only build the buildings and rent them. It doesn't allow for the subdivision to create 2 separate parcels.
Rachel, I wonder if you could show that graphic of what the before and after might be. I don't know how easy it is to share that, but I guess my sense of how this ends is that at some vote of something to something, this passes, and the state law is what we have. What I'm interested in is whether our architecture and design studio can sort of take this graphic and make some slightly, whoever made this, thank you very much, but some slightly more specific design guidelines for what this might look like in West Hollywood. I think it's appealing that no one has applied, but I think it's unlikely that no one will apply. This automatically takes what's probably $1 million property and makes it worth 2 or 3 times as much in sales value for those duplexes and others, and it won't be long before this becomes what we're doing. And so I know, as we moved from single-family homes in a pastoral West Hollywood in the 1920s to the sort of Zweibel community housing idea to the 1970s, or 1950s fourplex and the 1970s tuck under and the 1980s nonsense. And then, where we ended up now, which is sort of, 4 stories on top of a concrete parking box. I think we need to really understand what our strategy is for a neighborhood filled with these. And so I guess, is there any leeway with respect to design requirements or a strategy around planning those lots, smaller units up front, larger units in back? Is there anything we can do, not to slow down the process or make it more complicated, but to try and create a sort of Boston row house or Northern California houses walking down a hill, that sort of thing?
We are limited in our ability to have design guidelines adopted at this time based on state law, but we did develop our local regulations that are in front of you with our architectural design studio in order to provide all the objective standards that we could and wanted to allow for creativity, but also to ensure that we get the outcome that we want. And certainly, like every other project, when people come in, they will have the opportunity to work with our urban designer and city architect in order to have the best outcome for both the project and the community.
So, but you said we have limited ability, and then you said we worked with Rick, I guess, and others, but I didn't see any evidence of that in the staff report. Is that a separate report that's somewhere?
No, one of the items that we worked on was eliminating the setback from the new lot line that would be created if a person subdivides their property. So instead of mandating 2 separate buildings on the property, they could choose, assuming they comply with building codes, to put the 2 units together and create a side-by-side building with 2 units with no yard in between. And the point of that was to allow for the creation of a building that might feel more like a single-family house than 2 small houses. So it would still allow someone to build 2 individual units, but also allow them to possibly put them together in like a side-by-side duplex. So that's kind of what we're talking about and working with the limitations. The state law says it has to be a ministerial permit, which means that there's not the back and forth on urban design features in the approval process.
And one last question. So I still think we should come up with a couple, 3 versions of how 4 units might be placed on a property. Because if someone else does the work for that architect or that developer, why would somebody want to pay for someone else to do it if we already have a version in which they could select at least a design for the site that we know works and and is neighborhood loved, et cetera. And I guess the last question is, who owns the driveway? Which part of the parcel owns the driveway to the back?
If there was an easement to a subdivided lot in the back,
Yes,
I mean, it depends on the subdivision that's put before us, but typically it would be an easement granted to the property behind that's owned by the front property, but there are a number of different ownership scenarios and subdivision options that they could explore.
But it's also possible they could build this without any driveway.
Absolutely, yes. Since they're not required parking, they could build it without a driveway. They just need access in an easement form. So there would still need to be an easement to allow them to walk onto their property.
So I think, again, that's why I'm going to, and somewhere in this motion, perhaps suggest that we show some of those layouts. Because I think, you know, our fine-grained understanding of these 3 blocks and our city, somebody who, you know, lives in Lakewood or Pasadena and is an architect, I'm sure would be happy to have some suggestions from City Hall about how to lay out their site. Thank you.
We can certainly do that.
Thanks, John.
Can someone please double check about the R1 lots having been surveyed for historic resources? Because my understanding is R1 has not been surveyed.
It has not.
I will say that if there are any demolition requests, we would take a look at the historic nature of that particular project.
But Rachel just said there was a survey and that it showed no historic resources on either Green Acre or on Betty Way. So has there been a survey or not?
But we'll do a quick check on our historic documents and get back.
Okay, thank you. City Attorney Langer, do you have a comment?
Yes, I was just going to follow up on the owner occupancy requirement. I think the council's correctly asking questions about a challenging provision that comes straight from the state law. It's not ideal. It's not the way we would write our laws if we were in control of this. But any provision in the ordinance would be subject to all of the enforcement tools that we have in our enforcement toolbox. Violations of the zoning code are subject to the administrative penalty provision. The city can recover costs associated with abatement of violations. Requirements of the zoning ordinance may be enforced by injunctive or declaratory relief. So we would use whatever tools are available for any violation of the zoning ordinance. But admittedly, it's a difficult standard to enforce because it's something that's put in place when they subdivide the property, and then the building is there for many years. But it comes from state law, so it's...
Do we know what the status of the lawsuits are? Or lawsuit?
I think there has been one lawsuit filed by, I believe, a couple charter cities in Southern California.
Pasadena?
I don't think Pasadena joined it. Oh, are you talking about the enforcement against the city of Pasadena?
No, I'm talking about against SB9.
Right, I think those were some cities that have filed a lawsuit. They were charter cities, I think in Los Angeles County, and the lawsuit has been filed, but no decision has come, and it would probably be quite a while before we have anything from the court.
Do we, what is our percentage of single-family homes in the city? Is it something like 1% or 5% or something ridiculous like that?
Less than 1%.
Less than 1%, okay. If there's no other questions, I'll go to, yes?
We did get the information on the historic survey, so we haven't done the single-family zones recently. The only time the single-family zones were looked at was in the original 1987 historic survey.
Okay, so 1987, which was a long time ago. Okay, let's go to, do you have any questions? Let's go to public comment. Roy Oldenkamp, to be followed by Steve Martin.
Good evening, Roy Oldenkamp, City of West Hollywood. Thank you for having this issue come up. We are very concerned about these potentially historic properties on Betty Way and Green Acre. We do know that one of the parcels has been purchased as two parcels together on Betty Way, and since they're not designated historic, that doubles the lot size if it was to be combined, which would then compromise the integrity of all of Betty Way. So this is an issue we're really concerned about as well for Green Acre, where Michael Poles lived and was very active about trying to support this. So we really hope that you can somehow put a new R1A and R1C survey together for us, maybe the same time that ARG is doing the history one. And since we're looking at a year to put this together, that should be enough time to complete a survey, which will help us as the West Hollywood Preservation Alliance here in West Hollywood take care of getting these nominations together, because they do take some time and they do take money. But so that's our main concerns with this particular issue. And we also, if you go and look at SB 9, and if you go to just Google it, you'll see homestead.is, and they pay for all of the building on those properties in exchange for some of the income from it. So it could actually, anybody can just apply without a dollar bill, and this could be done for them. So we can see in the future, as John D'Amico was saying, quite a bit of action in this regard. So, but I urge you to go check out homestead.is and other sites. They're all ready to go, and they're going to put up to, if you look at their diagrams, it's four different units per subdivided lot, so it's 8 full units. So that's another reason neighbors are concerned about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Steve Martin.
Steve Martin, West Hollywood, and I'm going to urge the council to not make a decision anytime soon, and maybe spend some time contemplating this and looking at this. You know, I know John Erickson was talking about the whole concept of local control, which is why we became a city, and I don't believe that should be theoretical. You know, when a bad decision comes down from above, West Hollywood's not afraid to hit the streets. That's what we're doing now. This SB 9 was not, Sacramento has to come down with a lot of different things to micromanage how we manage cities. SB 9 is really a developer bill. As John D'Amico's pointed out, this is going to create more speculation in single-family dwellings. I don't know how this would impact our inclusionary fees, which you guys are going to consider tonight, but if a developer comes up, builds 4 units on a lot, and then he subdivides it, that means he's not paying any inclusionary fees because it's 2 and 2. So I think we're going to get shortchanged there. Also, just some real practical issues. There's litigation pending. There's no reason why we can't wait till that litigation is resolved. We're not in any hurry to pass this. I mean, just common sense things. Are we going to have twice as many driveways cutting up our residential streets? Or are we going to have one driveway where people murder each other trying to figure out who gets to park in it? I mean, there are so many things. The other issue is this. Betty Way, you're just talking about a health and safety risk with doubling, quadrupling the number of people who live there, with visitors, delivery trucks, ambulances. You know, people are going to die because the fire department can't get in there. This is bad law coming from Sacramento, and we have never been bashful about opposing bad laws. So I thank you for your leadership and consideration.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any comments from on the Zoom?
Yes, Mayor, we have 2 speakers.
Thank you.
Our first speaker is John Weisbart, followed by Lynn Russell. John, you will have 2 minutes. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself.
Done on this street. A month ago, 240 California cities signed a letter urging Governor Newsom to veto SB 9. West Hollywood was not one of these cities. Last month, 4 cities filed a lawsuit against SB 9. West Hollywood is not one of these cities. That petition says it is undisputed that planning and zoning laws are matters of municipal affairs. The constitutional right of municipalities to zone single-family residence districts and the sanctioning principle upon which that right is founded has been well settled law for almost 100 years. By enacting SB 9, the state eviscerated a city's local control over land use decisions and a community-tailored zoning process. West Hollywood's Planning Commission is happily going along with state government interpretation of municipality zoning laws. Sacramento created a one-size-fits-all law disregarding local government. Other cities in California may have more streets that are zoned for single-family housing, but not West Hollywood. Greenacre is one of the only single-family streets left in West Hollywood. I understand that many council members are concerned about housing. WeHo has already and is currently constructing multi-use, multi-story buildings around the city, 3 of them within 5 blocks of Greenacre. Will changing the zoning of 34 houses on Greenacre make a dent in the housing of our city? Maybe a few houses will subdivide or build a duplex. What I fear is that a homeowner will tear their place down, subdivide, build duplexes on both subdivisions, and sell despite an affidavit that they signed. It will cause a ripple effect, or even worse, we're left with unfinished construction like the house at 1130 Poinsettia Place. I received a campaign flyer from one of our council members with the slogan, "Tough enough to protect our neighborhoods." Protecting neighborhoods is more than just providing public safety. It's also maintaining the integrity of our current neighborhoods. I'm asking the council members to unanimously vote no on the Planning Commission's recommendations and join other cities in fighting the state overriding the municipality's right to plan their cities. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Lynn Russell. Lynn, you will have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Are we on?
Go ahead, Lynn.
Thank you. Good evening. Lynn Russell, West Hollywood. Good evening, Mayor Meister, Mayor Pro Tem Shine, and fellow council members. If I could please point out, and we can see through all of the discussion that's just taken place, the sequencing of 2M, which was on consent for the historic context study, has language added specific to R1A and R1C. This is calendared for approval this evening, as well as 3A, the item that we're currently on, the zone text amendment, as it appears to be an awkward sequencing of events, both of which deserve a full and complete hearing. A small bit of background, tangential to the concerns of Gus Bennett, prior to what eventually became the appeal for 931 Palm Avenue, was the disposition of Betty Way. A potential nomination of this unique and unusual street and its structures somehow was lost in the dust given Mr. Bennett's untimely death. He had fully anticipated a wider-reaching legal action as he felt compromise of the adjacent area appeared untenable. Although the HPC indicated considerable reservations about the Palm project, their antenna should have included a nomination of Betty Way by their own experts. Neither of these well-meaning efforts actually took place, but the City Council now has an opportunity to consider the benefits as they are vital to the integrity of the community. Kindly consider erring on the side of caution by moving forward with the historic context study, amended as I just suggested, and reserving action on 3A, which would reference both Betty Way and Green Acres. This will give an opportunity for this complex situation to sort itself out. It would be fitting and in honor of Michael Poles, and additionally, both Gus Bennett and Michael Poles put their hearts and souls into advocating for the right way for this to be resolved. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynn. Mayor, that was our last speaker on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. Well, I was going to speak, but if people have, if council members have questions first, Councilmember Horvath, and then Councilmember D'Amico.
So what happens if, my understanding is this is already state law. So what happens if we don't adopt this tonight and someone comes to City Hall asking to act upon what SB 9 provides? Then what happens then?
We would be required to proceed as best as we could within the requirements of the state law.
So what would you not be able to do in that situation?
So one of the items we couldn't do are what I talked about. Oops, sorry about that. That's what I talked about earlier, which would be setbacks from the new lot lines. It would stay the existing setbacks. So instead of being able to build a structure that might look like a duplex with two, you would have to have a setback from the property line. So that's something that we couldn't do because our zoning ordinance doesn't allow for 0 setbacks.
And if we wait...
Another way to look at this provision is that it's a transparency law. What we're doing is we're making the land use regulations in those areas transparent to all the residents, so that way they know exactly what can be allowed. As Rachel indicated, without this, it's murky. And so part of this is about transparency.
So is there anything regarding, I know that we're limited in terms of what we're able to do with regard to design guidelines, but is there anything else that we could contemplate to make sure that the impact of this state law change, which we cannot be exempt from, is there anything else that we could contemplate in terms of how we implement this policy that might help us do things like that setback and other things that help to contemplate how this could better be implemented in West Hollywood? If we took more time, are there other things we haven't considered?
We've really run through all of the things to consider, and again, we're limited by state law requirements that we don't have, that everything be an objective development standard.
Okay, that's my questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember D'Amico.
And actually, I kind of want to just do what Lindsay just did, and say that this is the law. We can delay our decision on it for 100 years, and still every property that is zoned this way can be redeveloped. Every property owner can submit their property for a historic designation. Every developer who comes to town and buys a house in one of these can put 4 units on it. I mean, I think I don't want to cherry pick a word that you said, John Kehoe, but I actually don't think it's murky at all. I think the state passed a law, and it's now the law. And if we want to make some slight adjustments around the edges, literally, right, then we can do that. And I hope we will, because I think there are some design choices that it would be helpful to help developers navigate through on those streets. But I appreciate Steve Martin coming up and asking us to wait, and Roy Oldenkamp asking us to wait, but we're not holding anything back. You know, it's already the law. It's already happened.
So I disagree. I think that implementation of this as presented is not feasible. I think Betty Way has houses on small lots and absolutely zip, no street parking. And it's a narrow street. So I do think that there are public safety issues. Las Colinas is also a small gated community with no street parking. There's no way to guarantee compliance regarding owner living on the site. The city provides waivers for excuses, and apparently property owners can ask for a waiver for excuses to not live on the site. Everyone is going to figure out how to get one. I think that we should be doing environmental studies on historic resources, parking, and infrastructure. I think we should look into the lawsuits and have staff get back to us on the status. I think the idea of amending the historic context study to include these R1 areas, particularly Greenacre and Betty Way, makes sense. And that we table the item until such time that we do these studies and see what the results are from the lawsuits. The city's position on SB 9 was oppose unless amended. It wasn't amended. I would vote no on the item and send a message to Sacramento that a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. And let's show them Betty Way and show them why Betty Way is zoned the way it's zoned. And I just can't imagine them going after us with less than 1% of our housing being single-family homes. This was not intended for West Hollywood. This was intended for the city of LA, where 60%, I think, of their housing is single-family housing. I believe it is like 60%. And you have you have lot sizes that are 6,000 square feet or 8,000 square feet. This is just absolutely ridiculous, and there's no reason for us to rush this. And if Councilmember D'Amico's idea of having UDAS look at this and coming back with something more reasonable, that makes sense, because the truth of the matter is Betty Way is going to end up with all 2 stories, because 800 square feet is not going to fit in those little lots. And again, 12 out of those 13 lots don't even qualify for this. So there's really no point. So I will wait to make any kind of motion, because I don't know where my colleagues are, except for maybe Councilmember D'Amico. Mayor Pro Tem Shine, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say I heard everyone who spoke, and there have been neighbors on both sides that have written in as well regarding historical status versus not. Some want that, some actually don't, because it affects potentially their property prices. And Mayor, I heard everything you've said. I've heard my colleagues. I'm not sure if I am here. All of the issues that you bring up are really, really important, good issues. But because this is state law, all of the issues still remain, because it can happen anyway. With that said, I actually am interested in us. So I am actually, I feel like we shouldn't lose the ability to do the little bit that we could, which is putting a little bit of local control in this with the setback issues and making sure that they're side by side. That's the little local control we have. It's so frustrating that we are getting one-size-fits-all mandates from the state, but the law is the law. It is what it is. And at the same time, I am interested in us, and I don't know procedurally, it would be an amendment of the historical context study, but us, and maybe we can add this to the motion, doing a study, but also at the same time moving forward with this, because I'd rather us have a little bit of control over how this pans out than just say, well, let's throw our hands up, because all of the issues that you brought up, this is law. It could happen, and then we have no way to have any control at all over it. And I love Councilmember D'Amico's idea of having some kind of pamphlets given out to folks who do want to develop and saying, okay, well, these are the, I guess, the standards we've come up with. We can't make them requirements, obviously, because of state law, but if we give something, it's better than nothing. So let's spend the time and our resources having UDAS come up with something to give to folks. And so, yes, I am interested in the historical context study to figure out, really, if equip our neighbors with something and do it. There's no reason not to. But as far as the item tonight, I think it's better for us to create some parameters than to just leave it, because otherwise it's still in effect.
Councilmember Horvath, sorry. I thought you were just going to.
I was just waiting for you. I think our community expressed our frustration on this state law change. That's why the council opposed it. We did not want to see our local control taken away. And the law passed and was signed into law by the governor. So now we have to deal with it. And I agree with Mayor Pro Tem that what local control we have left in terms of how this gets implemented in our community, I would like to codify as quickly as possible in the event that somebody does come forward with an application. My understanding in this community is that this applies to 53 properties, affordable, rent stabilized, units that were LS'd in the last 15 years, if they are occupied by tenants in the last 3 years, are not eligible. Owners can seek designation status. Owners can sell to buyers who legally agree in their contracts to not redevelop, according to these standards. Owners can rent these properties if they choose not to live there anymore. Developers cannot force anyone to sell them their home. The city cannot force anyone to develop or create an ADU if they don't want to, the people who currently own these properties. And I will say, there will still be single-family neighborhoods in West Hollywood, but the implication that because you live in a neighborhood that is 2 stories is somehow lesser quality, as somebody who lives in a building that's 2 stories and is only able to afford to live here because of those buildings, I'm grateful that there are places in the city that have increased the ability for people like me to live here. And I think that is the intention of this law. I understand that it was intended to create more housing opportunities throughout the state. And I suppose you could say that West Hollywood wasn't in mind, but I think it might have been because there is so much multifamily housing here already. And so, I don't think my quality of life has been diminished because of the place in which I live. In fact, my quality of life has increased because I live in West Hollywood. And I hope that we are able to create that for other people here. I understand that this policy is not, the fix that everybody's looking for in terms of providing affordable housing and its practical application in West Hollywood. And we should do all we can to protect units that may be considered for a historic designation. And I'm glad that the representative of our local organization that does that is here, and perhaps our staff can work with them to make sure that if there are any properties that should be considered, that information is readily available to them, because it sounds like they're going to make an effort to protect those properties, and that's exactly what their organization does. And what we need in our city is our organizations like that to do that work. But our job is to make sure that when state law is passed and it must be implemented at the local level, that we do it in the best way possible to protect our community and our local control. And I think that's what's before us tonight, which is why I'm going to support it.
Okay, then. We're going to close the public hearing, and if there are no other comments, there's a motion to adopt. Councilmember Erickson, seconded by Councilmember Horvath, and I guess we're ready for a vote.
Before
or
we
we're
vote,
not.
I just wonder if the maker and the seconder of the motion would agree, and maybe you did, to direct UDAS to come up with some site planning options as a city for the implementation of this, and hopefully they can maybe put those together in the next 90 days, and they don't need to come back to this council, I don't think, but I would like to see them. Maybe you can send them around if that's all right with you two.
Yeah, I assumed that would be a part of this motion. I'm happy to make that explicitly clear. And before we vote, I will just say I just didn't want to ignore the members of the public. I didn't want to repeat what all my colleagues have said, which I do agree on. But here we are, and this is state law. So.
I also want to know, I am interested in us doing a historic context study. I want to move forward with this tonight, but would you be open to, and maybe the city manager or someone can weigh in on how we can add this to direction?
I think we should, I know those consultants have been hired, So I think we should just pose the question to the city manager about that, and then maybe you could report back at our next, or whenever you get input on that, David, to see if that is possible. I don't want to make that part of the motion because I think that could be something done separately personally, but happy to give direction to David to see if it could
let's
be
give
added.
direction at least to look into that and see. I'm sure there's a budget or something, and come back to us on that part.
We will definitely look into it. Yeah, we've already went through the RFP process and are negotiating the contract with the consultant. So, but we'll look into adding it.
Okay. As long as that direction to look into it is in there, I'm good.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And I was wondering how far along we were in that contract process too.
David, if that's not possible, can staff bring an item forward to do that, to do the historic study of the R1s?
Yeah, we'll look into that as well, and we'll report back to you.
Great.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yes.
Before the vote is taken, I would just like to read the title of the ordinance into the record.
Okay, should I withdraw my vote?
No.
Okay.
Until I hit the record button, it's not official. So this evening we are introducing on first reading an ordinance of the City Council of the City of West Hollywood adopting amendments to Title 19 zoning ordinance and Title 20 subdivision regulations, West Hollywood Municipal Code, to allow certain properties in the R1A and R1C zone districts to subdivide their properties and construct up to 2 dwelling units plus accessory dwelling units as already authorized in accordance with recently adopted state law, SB 9, in the City of West Hollywood and finding the action statutorily and categorically exempt from CEQA.
Thank you so much. Better you than me. Okay, motion passes 4-1. And I just want to say that, you know, if we do stand up to laws, to federal law, when we're a sanctuary city, the state is going to be or it already is a sanctuary state. So there are times we can go up against the law and protest, but thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 4A has been tabled. Item 4B, housing element and strategy for the development of more affordable housing. I don't know that we necessarily need a whole report, but I do have some questions. Do we have staff?
Yeah, we'll switch to Zoom.
Rachel Diamond. I do have a presentation for you tonight, but instead of that presentation, I'm happy to move forward with questions off the bat. We have a number of staff here available.
Thank you, Rachel. I guess my question is, we received a memo from our city attorney today, and I guess I wanted to understand better what our options are with regard to submitting or not submitting a housing element within the next, week or month or year. And I'll also mention that I believe there are cities that have been submitting and then they're getting them back and resubmitting and resubmitting and resubmitting. So I don't know that there's, there might be something we can do so that we don't lose any kind of funding in that. So if you could just sort of clarify those issues, thank you.
Well, maybe it might be helpful if staff could first report on the history of what has been submitted, what they've gotten back from HCD, and then we could talk about what's possible. Is that all right, Rachel?
Okay.
Absolutely. So we submitted a draft to HCD in the fall after going to council, and they did their initial review and gave staff comments that we received in early December. We then went back and made changes to the housing element based on the comments that we received from HCD, and then went for final approval recommendation from Planning Commission and ultimately to the City Council, where you asked us to hold off on submittal to HCD and held off on approval. We have spoken to HCD and they noted that it does typically take a number of rounds for that final document to get certified by HCD, typically 2 to 3 rounds of comments based on our neighboring cities and what they're seeing. So if we did move forward with adoption at a later date and submit it to HCD, we do anticipate that it may take multiple rounds of comments to get that certification.
So one of the issues with delaying submitting the housing element is that the rezoning of properties to comply with URENA would need to be completed by October. And so the longer it takes to get the final housing element up to HCD, the longer it'll take for HCD to tell us whether that October 15th, 2022 deadline absolutely applies, whether West Hollywood does or does not have to rezone any properties to meet its URENA. So there's just a little bit more information that HCD could provide once the final draft is submitted to HCD. So from my perspective, the earlier you get it up, the better. But I also understand that there's, council policy and council direction to try and provide more housing and more affordable housing and make it even a more impactful document. So I think that's what the council's trying to weigh tonight and understanding the best time to adopt that housing element and get it up to HCD for certification.
I mean, it seems to me, do we have any speakers on this?
I don't have anyone in chambers. Do we have anyone on Zoom?
The one speaker we had signed up is no longer in the meeting.
It's on or not on? Okay. I guess my concern is that we may lose, funding, and we have some projects that we're looking at for over the next year to get funding. Is that going to jeopardize the possibility of us getting funding, for example, for the Holloway project?
I don't know if having a certified housing element is an eligibility criteria for the home key funds. I think Allison and Brian can speak to some existing grant applications that might be impacted and what grant applications looking forward might be impacted in the period of time until the city is certified.
Yeah, I can jump in. It's the home key funding does not require a housing element in order to receive our funding award. We did win Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars that were announced earlier this year. It was a $2.2 million grant that we have lost. We did not, we don't have a certified housing element, and it went largely to Northern California cities that are on a different timeline for recertification. But that's been confirmed by HC staff. We also aren't eligible to apply for that funding, this year because we would not be. That's an item that would be required in order to apply. There's also a number of other grants, namely the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities grant funding is going to be tied. And HCD just indicated that they're going to start aligning more and more of their baseline requirements to a certified housing element. And then the last would be the pro-housing designation. We cannot submit the paperwork in order to receive that designation until we have a certified housing element.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Councilmember Horvath?
Yes, the last time we talked about this, I voted no because I think we need to have a certified housing element. It sounds like we're already missing out, and that's concerning to me. I understand that we have big ideas about how we want to accomplish some of these goals, some of which has been outlined in this report. I have questions about some of the items that have been identified, but it is, for me, I want to make sure that we do not leave here tonight without giving direction to staff to move forward with attempting to certify our housing element through HCD based on the last revisions that we've given, based on any other information we would like to provide. We can do that. We can submit while we're working to accomplish these broader goals, and if we continue waiting, it will only cost us more. And so I really think that needs to happen tonight. I'm happy to talk about the other items if we want to get into a broader discussion, but that piece I think has to happen tonight.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I was going to ask is, can we resubmit, or can we change our housing element after we submit it, if it's not losing any units, or it's increasing units, which is the goal?
Absolutely, we can change it at any time in the process, whether it be while we're waiting for certification or after it's certified.
Okay, and
And certainly we can continue to work on all the work plan items that we discussed tonight as we're working through certification with the state as well.
Councilmember Erickson?
Thanks so much. I just wanted to say that I am satisfied by this staff report. I too, like Councilmember Horvath, want to make sure that we give direction here tonight. What's probably going to happen is what Rachel's prognosticated, is that we're going to submit this. The state's going to say, okay, you're kind of almost there, come back, right? So to your point, Mayor, we're going to see this again. But I do think that the staff has heard us. I've had meetings. I've read through this. I've actually went through a lot of the housing elements that were submitted and approved and looked at what they were doing over the last week, which is weird considering my life. But I will say that I am expecting that, but I do think our housing element and what we've actually provided in this conversation has gone quite much further, than other cities currently are. And I think that we are going to be in a much better position. So I am prepared to approve this and give that direction. I was the one that wanted to move it to consent, but I think staff has done a good job here and we should move forward.
Is there any public comments? Oh, no public. Oh, okay, then great. I agree. I think we need to make a decision tonight and move forward. The one thing I will say is we had a letter submitted from Ed Levin that I thought he had some good points about the inclusionary housing element part of this, which included working with UDOS and considering adding FAR-based density into the mix of possibilities considered to maximize our affordable housing. I would like that added as additional direction in this item tonight.
Okay. Councilmember D'Amico?
Thanks. I guess I'm maybe in a slightly different place, mostly because the part that's labeled next steps in response to the council direction is a fairly comprehensive list of options and possibilities that does expand on what was suggested in the housing element draft. And that's much appreciated, but there is not a timeline attached to any single item there. And so I'm not confident any of these will be done before the next housing element is due, which I think is how we got to today, because we had asked in October and then asked in January and then asked in February, when are you going to do these things? And got a list of here would be some really great things to do, and never a suggestion that they would ever be done, except that they would be done when the housing element was approved, which is what happened 7 years ago when we said, when are you going to do these things? And they were not done when that housing element was approved. So I can't actually support this unless we can, as a council, agree that these will be done by the end of the year. I mean, you need to do them. You know how to do them. You know how to put together the things that need to happen to do this. But it's not happening.
Councilmember, if I may, I think we had suggested a 12-month work plan schedule to coincide with your request to the state for a 12-month extension.
Right.
So that's what we're
I guess that was my concern, that if we're submitting the housing element now, then we're not waiting 12 months, we're just submitting it. So then that 12 months sort of disappears with that self-imposed deadline. So if what you're saying is that, yes, we're going to submit a housing element now, but also have a 12-month deadline, which I'm not sure how we keep ourselves to that if there's nothing pending, but 12 months from now, I know someone else will be asking maybe. So that, that's my concern. And I know you all heard that because I said it all to you, when you had our meeting with us, so.
Councilmember Erickson?
Councilmember D'Amico, to go back on your point, I know they're coming back in August with an update. Would you at that point, if we could give them some additional time to put together a timeline that could be like you did with the property on Doheny, annual reports on these aspects as updates that we can get as a council once a month, something like that, to keep the drumbeat going on these items, so that way it's not only there for the public, but it's also there for us, and we can not only hold ourselves to that standard, but then we as a council can say, we're not making movements on this, this is the reason why we wanted it this, and we can have that longer discussion. Would that satisfy your request?
Yeah, I think we just want to be doing this. I think we want to be in a position, now 10 months from when we made the last decision 2 months ago, to be starting processes for production of more housing. We all know that if these things are in place a year from now, then that housing won't be showing up until 4 years from now or longer. And so that was my interest in keeping the time as a major factor in this. And I understand, losing awards from the governor are serious and unfortunate, but I also have the sense that a much more robust plan to do what we're being asked to do will be that much more appealing when we finally have one in place, to apply for even more dollars and to have our new lobbyist go lobby and say, we're serious about making these, send us more money, state of California, and we will make them.
I would like to just interject that this is a top commitment of us to work on the housing items. We know it's critical from the council's point of view, and it's critical just from our society, our participation in society, to provide additional housing. One of the reasons why we didn't have specific timelines is we were coming up with various ideas, and we're trying to figure out what things we can pull out and do with as little public involvement as possible, what does require public involvement. So what are the different elements that we can move through quickly? What other are the elements that need public vetting? And so we're trying to figure out what all that would be. And we'd have more of an idea in a little while, because we'll have the ability to look at all the different options, including looking at FAR and that type of thing. So, we have a big laundry list of items. Some things will move separate on different paths. And so we need to figure out which path is the best for which of these different items.
If I can just, I just want to add that I think we all know that if we keep doing things the way we've been doing them, it would require us to build over 10,000 units to get 2,000 affordable units, right? And that's not going to be possible in this 7-year timeline, no matter what we do. So I think we should be looking at ways to incentivize building affordable housing projects versus housing projects, because we know that we don't need more luxury housing, and that will come anyway, with or without incentives from us, because that's what makes a lot of money for a lot of people. But we really need to figure out how do we get the affordable projects so that we don't have to build necessarily 9,000 luxury units to get there. So I'm happy to support this motion. We also know that this is going to come back to us again. So there's really, we know that the state is not going to accept it. And so, let's just get it out there so we can continue with our funding, not worrying about funding for projects that we do have in the pipeline that we want to make sure are funded. And, after reading this, I just think that we need to move forward with it, and we'll just continue having our high expectations on how we're going to creatively build 4,000 units. But we definitely have to focus on how do we build the affordable units. So, Mayor Pro Tem?
Agreed, Mayor. And I just want to, I did second the motion, but Councilmember Erickson, is your motion to include the comments I made about UDAS, Ed Levin's letter, UDAS, and FAR? Is that in there? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Then I have seconded.
Great. We can have a.
Just to clarify, so the motion includes bringing back the housing element for adoption soon, like at the next meeting or so, and then coming back with updates every 3 months, including. Okay.
It includes, sorry, David, I should have made that clear. It was including Mayor Pro Tem Shine's comments about UDAS, as well as taking into consideration Councilmember D'Amico's points regarding timeline, as well as an agendized action plan that would be on our agenda. I'm happy. I know once a month for our meetings might be too much, but I'm happy with bi-monthly. But we need to see that, the public needs to see it, that we're dedicated to it, and that way we're also all holding ourselves accountable to that same schedule to do all those things.
My comments also included considering adding FAR-based density into the mix of possibilities and UDAS.
Yes, apologies.
Just to be clear for the clerk.
Did that make sense? Okay.
Okay. All right, motion passes 5-0. And now, I believe, we are on to excluded consent. And we are looking at first 2Q. And 2Q is, hold on, let me get my agenda.
Mayor, I can read it if you'd like.
Okay.
It's amendment number 3 to the agreement for services with Land Images Incorporated to revise the Beverly Triangle Plaza conceptual design and support associated community outreach efforts.
Thank you very much. I know that Councilmember Erickson, you pulled that out of off of consent, and we have David Ben there. Do we need a report?
I don't need a report. I was just alarmed by one of the property owner of that area stating that the artist had not reached out to what it seemed to be major stakeholders there, and I wanted David to be able to confirm or deny that. And if it is confirmed, I think we should table this item for that proper communication to occur.
Good evening, council members. David Fenn, Associate Planner in the Long Range Planning Department. I want to clarify a few things on that. There was a previous outreach process where we reached out to the adjacent businesses and residents. There were a number of activations at the site, virtual community meetings, but the intent of this item is not to move forward with the previous design that came out of that process, but rather to give the design team adequate scope to enable a fresh start with a clean slate for the project, to reboot the design process and support additional public outreach that would include reaching out to all of those stakeholders again, and really provide a whole new outreach process and a whole fresh design to respond to some of the previous concerns and to make sure that we're reaching out to all the right people in that process.
And we've already paid quite a dollar amount for this, but another $55,000. What is this consultant doing then that staff couldn't do because this ticket is getting quite expensive?
So that's another item I should clarify. The 250,000 figure is the total contract value. It's not the dollar figure expended to date. So that original total includes project phases that we haven't gotten to yet. So right now we're proposing additional fee to allow the landscape architecture team to redo the conceptual design phase, which is kind of the early landscape architectural drawings and early, feasibility into, how the structural engineering on the arc, for example, or research around, making sure that none of the placements of trees or vertical structures conflict with the underground storm drain that we know is below the site and those sort of issues. And typically with a project like this, you'd follow that up with subsequently, more detailed design leading up to construction documents and eventually construction administration. None of those later phases have been done yet, so the actual amount expended to date is closer to 80,000, and that was for various iterations and refinements of the previous design, various outreach that ultimately resulted in a project that, in the eyes of the community members that we heard from in a series of outreach events last summer, was unacceptable for various reasons. So we're returning to council with a proposal for adequate scope to allow that design team to completely redesign the project with a new outreach process, to essentially design a whole new, a series of architectural plans, civil engineering plans, et cetera, to take through the process again. But to clarify, it's not a $300,000 bill that we're at right now. It's $80,000 of a $250,000 contract is expended. We are proposing allowing in that adequate scope to redo that conceptual design phase, but the money for those subsequent phases has not been spent yet. So that was just a misconception.
Thank you.
Do we have any public speakers on this item?
No, Mayor, we do not.
Okay. Councilmember D'Amico?
David, I have a question. In the staff report, there's a series of drawings that show a sort of mix of seating areas and trees and open areas. And then there's a second set of drawings that show a sort of sculptural object in a landscape, in a much more formal landscape. What is the difference between those two? And was the first one abandoned for the second one?
So you're referring to one of those renderings is from the 2014 master plan, which developed a very high-level concept for a plaza at this site. There were a number of things that weren't, completely fleshed out yet. A lot of decisions weren't made yet in terms of specific, landscape features or specific site elements. Certainly, there was no discussion yet on what the public art component for the project would look like. There were other things that were, envisioned by that plan, but are not generally best practices that local jurisdictions are pushing forward at this time. For example, that original concept relied on fountains along the edge of the site with Beverly to provide sort of a buffering sound from those fountains to limit the noise, the impact of the noise from the traffic on Beverly Boulevard. Most jurisdictions are not moving forward with water features because of the ongoing drought and just having to often have to turn those off to kind of set an example for the community. So it didn't seem like there are a number of things like that that are no longer feasible. So in response to those issues and wanting to take another crack at if there's a better solution to possibly provide a better layout with parking and the driveway configuration, as well as to kind of get the really more refined answers on other factors that weren't really known at the time of the conceptual design. Like, for example, there's an underground storm drain kind of bisecting the site that limits where you can put trees or foundations for lights that required a more detailed design work to be done. and also just, taking any conceptual plan from a master plan level to a point where you could build it. There's additional landscape architecture work that needs to be done. So the subsequent set of renderings that you referred to addressed a lot of those things, taking out some of the factors that are no longer as feasible, like fountains, while also introducing, the final, what was then, the proposed public art component, which it turned out that, a number of community members had concerns with based on, enclosed spaces and sightlines. That's resulting in us proposing to redesign the space away from that subsequent proposal with the sculptural structure you're referring to.
So I guess what I am left wondering is if it wouldn't be better to not ask this consultant to design the public art, but in fact design a garden that has a location for our Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission to select long-term temporary public art like they do in the median along Santa Monica Boulevard. I've looked through their website. They're just not artists. They're landscape designers, and their landscapes in their simple forms are quite nice. They're more sort of complicated sculptural ones, I think. To me, it's not clear that they have the sort of ability to make something sculptural in this place. And further, I guess my biggest concern is that fully half of the site is left without shade, and that's kind of what we have already, a parking lot without shade. So I think we need to formalize the interest in shade and reducing heat island effect. And I guess finally, with that said, the caller who owns the building, I don't know what the name of the building is, the Beverly Robertson building, suggested that that was accessible parking that was needed by patients. And in fact, there are no accessible spots there, and the plan proposes one, perhaps, I guess, maybe two. So I think we just need to take with a grain of salt whatever their concern is. It sounds like they were not really even actually checked into whether or not they'd been contacted, because they said they participated in meetings, but they were never contacted directly, and I'm not sure what that means, because they participated. So I guess what I just want to say is that Land Images, they have a business. It's an actual business. They have a practice, but I'm not convinced they're the right firm to be coming up with sculptural forms in our community. My sense is they can probably give us a very nice garden with a location for our Public Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission to select works. So I'm not sure what the motion is, except for them to continue working. That would be my direction about what you asked them to do. There's 5 of us. No one else is chiming in. There's 30,000 community members. They probably have a point of view, but that would be mine. Thank you.
Well, I'll chime in. The biggest issue with the design was that the community was under the impression that this was supposed to be a public facility with grassy area and trees, and that would be driving it rather than the art. And the fact that the art that was chosen was problematic. So I think that is really the whole reason for the reset button, which we pressed, a couple of months ago. This space is obviously adjacent to residence on Bonner, and there's a flagship store. The Leica store is a flagship store, which should not be blocked from view on Beverly. All you have to do is look at their storefront and see that it's art right there. So I would like to see our residents, Leica, the flagship store Leica, and the building management, the that their opinions be heavily weighted in this process. And again, I'm happy to see the reset button being pressed, and hope that we are looking at first this as a public space and the art as an accent to it without interfering with the Leica store. So that would be how I understand it. Councilmember Horvath, are you pressing your?
I just was going to clarify because the question was asked. Since I hit the button to make the motion, I'm happy to have the motion be inclusive of the comments that are made here tonight. I know that we were contacted by the West Hollywood West Residents Association, who expressed happiness, confidence, something positive that we're going in this direction to revisit where we're going. And it sounds like from David's description that we are going to pursue a more an all-inclusive process to consider all of the suggestions that both you and Councilmember D'Amico have made. So I'm happy to include that as part of my motion.
Great. Can we have a vote? If there's no other comments? Motion passes 5-0. Okay, moving right along. We are now moving to 2W. And 2W was pulled by Councilmember Horvath. That's the Sacramento Legislative Action Day for appointed officials.
Yeah, so I wanted to, well, are there any speakers on this item? Okay, so I'm glad if this is about education and giving our board members an opportunity to sort of have the experience of going to Sacramento and understanding how it works. But I think that we as the elected body are entrusted by the residents of this community to advocate for certain positions. And so I think if this is seeking information, I think that's important and good, and I support that. I think that there are commissions that would also benefit from this, from having that kind of an opportunity. But I do believe that, you know, it's how our city government is structured, that the city council is the body entrusted to represent the city on these legislative issues. The advisory boards and commissions, for the most part, not all of the commissions, but most of our appointed official bodies make recommendations to city council on policies that we then take action on. And so I just want to avoid any sort of confusion that there's direction coming from an advisory board, or that there's, you know, potential Brown Act issues on these kinds of things, when they're actually they are tasked with giving us the advice to then take action on behalf of the city. So I'm open to this in concept if we're shaping it in that direction. But I want to be mindful that we're the ones who are entrusted with that responsibility.
I'm happy to answer that, Councilmember. Yes, absolutely. We wanted to go to answer your question in general. I believe we were trying to figure out how this would be handled by staff to have all of the council be present and up there and essentially be with these individuals, but we be those individuals that are advocating but showing the support of the people that advise us and what impacts them on that legislation. No way they wouldn't be the ones doing that job that we would be doing. It is also educational. It is oftentimes, as I've seen from being an advisory board member and then a commissioner, more and more boards, and I know Melissa can talk to this, or Hernan if you're watching in the ether, are very interested in legislative items. So we wanted to start small with what was kind of listed here, and then if this is successful, which I believe it will be, for them to look at how we could expand that and to see how we can have it. Not every board member is going to go, like not all of the LGAB, they would elect one person, and Melissa, when we talked about this, we were very clear with Brown Act issues and how it would happen, but it would be a set priority and prerogatives of how they would lay it out. There'd be structure to it, so that way we could avoid some of those things that could occur.
Yeah, I think I can absolutely see the usefulness of getting an understanding of how Sacramento works, how legislative items come forward, how witnessing how people engage in advocacy. I just want to make sure that we're the body entrusted to do that advocacy, because that's why we get elected.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I just wanted to make sure was very clear.
Yep, we would be the ones up there. I mean, of course, it'd be great if we could all go, or if some of us can go and lead those tours in a way. Also, I think, as I said in our meeting with staff, I don't know anyone, and I don't mean to call out this advisory board member, but if Yola Doré is in your face talking about accessibility and disability rights issues, there's no one in this world that will ever say no to her. But it's a great educational opportunity to show the power of our advisory board members and why they're so important, but then to kind of demystify this, Sacramento local. We've been having that conversation tonight a little bit and see how this gets made and do all those things. So, well, not just to classify Yola, every board member and commissioner in this city. It's hard to say no to any of them, but as you know.
Great. I appreciate Councilmember Horvath pulling this item and clarifying it, and I think that we need to set the expectations, and that was really important. So thank you very much. Do we have a motion?
Well, I can withdraw if you want to make the motion. Okay. Okay.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. And to Z, my question there is, well, first of all, from the comments that we heard earlier this evening, I don't know that the property owner of 7906 was notified based on what the commenter suggested. But I also am not clear that we need to go through a local designation process in order to get the clock fixed. I am supportive of us. I believe there's community benefit to a functional clock, and I'm happy to have the city engage if there's an appropriate way to do that to help with restoring the function of the clock. My concern comes in where the city is directing the initiation of these proceedings. I think I see Mr. Oldenkamp is still here with us. If an organization like his wanted to initiate that process, or there was some sort of community-led effort to initiate this process, but I think that given that we've heard at least one of the property owners in these addresses could potentially be adverse, and ultimately, my understanding, the objective is to get the clock functional. I don't think that we need to designate it in order to get the clock functional. I think that we should consider the designation on its own merits, and there may be reasons why we would want to consider that at the local level. I question what sort of precedent we're setting if the city is initiating it against the wishes of a property owner. And that's the question I wanted to raise. If we could get directed on how we get city resources to fix the clock, which I think has been the years-long issue, I'm interested in that. But I think this is something different.
Well, I was just going to ask if there's any public comment, because Roy is still here and he may have a comment, or he may not.
Can I make a comment briefly?
Absolutely. The night is young. It's only 9:30.
Roy Oldenkamp, City of West Hollywood, founding member, West Hollywood Preservation Alliance. We have been looking at that building. I live very close to it. It's really quite an impressive building. It does have beautiful pilasters. Because all four of those corners initially were developed around the same time, it's all that we have left in that area. These were major thoroughfares. And so if you look at the Fairfax elevation of the building, it's stunning. It's beautiful. It's got gorgeous pilasters, Palladian windows. It's in great shape from what I can tell. Even the back alleyway is really an industrial, cool-looking presence. So, I mean, I find of all those two-story buildings built in the early 1900s, it's one of the most impressive. It's hard to see that sometimes. There's foliage in the way. There's a bus stop in the way. There's some additional signage added, especially on the Fairfax elevation. But it's really a lovely building, and whether we consider it important historically or not, I think most historians would agree that it does speak to the development patterns in this area, and it is largely intact, and it has neoclassical elements that are still very vibrant and outstanding. Now, regarding the ownership of the building and protesting against possible designation, it's already designated on the state level. So we do have that as a precedent, which works in our favor as preservationists as well. And I think they mentioned also the interiors have all been changed. But historic designation doesn't necessarily mean the interiors in this context. It could just be the elevations of the building. So I think all those should go into play in consideration in this. We have other structures that we should be saving, like the Bing Crosby building, whether the developers want to keep that or not. Often they won't, like the Cat and Dog Hospital as well. So sometimes we have to make a stand, and I think this building might be worth that stand. Thank you.
And my comment on that is I'm not commenting on the merits of anything that you just said on purpose, because it sounds like if there's a process, it might come to us. I'm just questioning whether the city should be initiating that process as opposed to what typically happens where it comes from an organization like yours or somewhere else.
We would hope that the city, being an enlightened element that does have a really robust program for cultural designation, would take the lead on more and more of these going forward. As personally, I feel like it should have in the past, because we are, as a board and as preservationists, we're unpaid, and we just spend untold hours trying to preserve the cultural context of this city. It ain't easy, and we need help a lot. And it's been a pandemic. People are a little tight in the wallet right now, and I can knock on so many doors, but you guys have a few more assets than I do. So.
And I just wanted to say that we actually do have that power. We did it at our last meeting with how we do, and we did receive a memo from the city attorney giving us that classification to designate these types of items. To your point, Councilmember Horvath, and maybe City Attorney Lauren Langer could explain how that is, because we did get an update on why and how we actually can do that.
I'm not saying we don't have the authority. I'm saying we're setting a precedent that I don't think we want to set. I think the last meeting we initiated a process for a city-owned property. This is a privately owned property. We have an understanding that at least one property owner is going to oppose us, which means potential litigation, which is all I'll say. I think what the ultimate objective here is getting the clock fixed, and ultimately, even if we go through this process and we do designate at the local level, since it's already been designated at the state level, we already see that a designation status doesn't yield a functional clock because it's already been designated and the clock isn't working. So I think if what the objective is getting the clock fixed, I would rather see us focus on that piece. And if we want to designate it at the local level and initiate that process, that's certainly possible. But I think if we go through the typical public process, it might avoid other complications that the city could face by initiating it on a private property without the support of the property owner, is the point I'm making.
But this is a process. We're not doing it tonight. It's a process that will go through everything that is. And if you listen to the property owner themselves, or to Gunter or to Roy over here, they've owned the building for what it seemed like a long time, and I am wondering what upkeep they have even provided to the building, or what we would be facing if the building isn't deemed, and what cultural and local resources we will continue to lose if we do not start this process as a city. And regarding precedent, I think it's an understatement to state that the city wouldn't want to set a precedent to designate what little buildings we have left as cultural historic designations. Whether or not that's a private property or a public property could be argued during the process, but ultimately that's for us to decide, and people get to vote how they want to vote. But the city does have the power, as we all know, to start that process if we so wish to.
So just to clarify, by voting for this, we would be starting a process to review.
Yes.
To see if it is something that we want to designate as local. It doesn't designate it.
Exactly. And maybe, Lauren, could you talk about what we would be doing just tonight here with this item?
That's correct. Similar to the item that was at the last meeting, tonight's item is simply to initiate the process so that the analysis can be done. There will be a full hearing at the Historic Preservation Commission, a fully noticed public hearing for anyone interested to participate and present information for and against designation for the commission to weigh. And if the commission recommends approval, the item would come back to City Council on consent unless it's appealed, and then it comes back for a full public hearing before the City Council.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember D'Amico?
As a point of disclosure, I had some interaction with Roy earlier today about this, and I guess two things have come up since then that I think are worth understanding more deeply. The first is the woman who spoke said that the 7906 property is not one that is owned by them. Do we know if the staff contacted them?
Not that I'm aware.
Okay. And then I guess the second thing is that so I know that if somebody bought that property at some point, that could change hands, and there was an interest in developing it, then there would have to be a historic review by the developer, and then they would discover that it's designated at the state level and that it has some historic pedigree, and would certainly cause, at that time, a question about what is the importance of having a historic designation at the time of trying to change something significant about what is a significant building. But I think to get closer to what it seems is the purpose of this is to make sure that that building is recognized and that that clock is fixed. And I guess for me, after talking with my colleague, Councilmember Horvath, it occurred to me that if we're going to spend $25,000 or $30,000 doing a historic study of this building, I'd rather we spent that and fixed the clock and know that any future possible development of this building would include a historic review done by and paid for by the developer, with the understanding that it's already designated, and so it's unlikely that we would get rid of a historic building. Your point, Roy, that we did get rid of the dog and cat hospital for a larger, bigger development, so all things being equal, that's certainly possible to do even if we have a city designated property. So I'm leaning towards wanting us to either do two things at once or do them sequentially. And the one that I would like that we did first is to see if we can work with the property owner to get the clock fixed before we work against the property owner's interests. Because, they'll have to hire consultants, they'll have to hire an attorney, they'll have to hire people, even if it's only themselves, to attend meetings to talk about how they don't want this to happen. And meanwhile, they're not going to spend money to fix a clock that they haven't seemed to be interested in fixing for the decades that they've owned it. So I am at a sort of crossroads about what is the actual goal. If the actual goal of this council is to get it designated historic, then we should vote on that. If the goal is to get the clock working, then I don't think we should vote against the interests of the property owner.
So I My understanding is that we want to look at the property, and the clock is part of it, but it's the property. And the concern I have is if we don't do the review, they can make changes to the building that may not require a lot of, not redevelopment, for example, and so wouldn't require a historic study. And then by making those little changes here and there and here and there, then that's what affects the integrity of the building. And so then it may not be able to qualify as a local historic site, and it may lose its state significance as well if they're allowed to do that. So that would be my concern. Councilmember Erickson?
Thank you so much, Mayor and my colleagues. I guess I just don't know if I have good faith that the owners of the building would even work with the city to find a way to fix the clock. And they asked me this question when I met with them, is this only about the clock? And I said, no, if you read the staff report, there's much more in there about this building that is worthy of consideration. And so, this isn't something about an individual in our community who's been fighting for this and has offered up what it seems to be his own cultural and monetary dollars to try to even just fix the clock. The answer seemed to be unequivocally no to them, to him to do that. And so looking at the building, and I do share your concerns as well, Mayor, about how some tweaks can be made. And I think holistically looking at it and then having the clock, of course, be a piece to it, along with what Roy said, with everything else, as well as, who's been there and what's been there. I've gotten a couple texts about people's offices that were once there at one point for people who have been in the city much longer than me. But I think this, again, to just reiterate, this is the initiation of a process. Litigation, as we all know, is something that people make their lives off of and will always do. But to continue to ignore or to set aside the opportunity to look at a process to designate these things as a cultural resource, I think is something fully within our power to do. And then there is a public hearing, as well as what Lauren Langer said, and how we will have that say earlier. And this property as well, if you look at the amount of taxes they pay, is not the same as new developments because of Prop 13. Right? Am I getting it right? Thank you. So they pay at a very different clip than other people, and the families held onto this property for what I think is 75. I mean, it's been quite some time. So, and I will make the motion, but I'm also happy to make sure the other property owner, per what the public commenter said tonight, is notified of a process being initiated as well, if that is the will of this council to move forward in that way.
I have a question for the city attorney. Is there a process issue with moving forward, as Councilmember Erickson indicated, just in case there may be potential litigation that could come back and bite us?
Well, I think there's always a potential when you're doing a quasi-judicial land use hearing that you're weighing evidence, and that when the final decision is made, the decision has to be based on substantial evidence. And so this starts the process to gather the evidence and have the commission review it. So that is always a possibility when you're dealing with a land use hearing, dealing with private property.
No, I guess my question is, if we make so we postponed this one meeting because the owners weren't notified. It was my understanding they were all going to be notified, but there's still one owner that has not been notified. Would we weaken our position as far as notice in any way if we made all this decision tonight, rather than, because I know there's going to be further hearings if we vote for this, so there'll be opportunities at those hearings for them to come. So my question to you is, would we put ourselves in a weak position if we move forward tonight? Or would there be other opportunities for those owners to come once we notify them and say, okay, now you go to this next hearing, and then it would come back to us anyway at some point, and so on and so forth?
There are absolutely opportunities for those other owners to participate. I don't know if staff who did the noticing is available tonight to say who was noticed and who wasn't. I don't have that information.
Got it.
But that was the will of the council at the last meeting to provide notice.
And we have the legal right as a city, whether or not it is our own property versus commercial property to, I'm assuming you were in the meetings with Councilmember Erickson, probably looked at this, but just to say it on the record, we have the legal and the powers to do this.
Yes, under the city's historic preservation ordinance, the city council can initiate a nomination proceeding. And as I mentioned, the process is just starting. The council hasn't made up its mind as to whether or not it's historic or not.
Got it.
It's just to initiate the review process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And who didn't?
Councilmember D'Amico.
Councilmember D'Amico. Okay, motion passes 4-1. And that is our last item because we have nothing on legislative. Any public comments at this time?
I do not have anyone in chambers signed up to speak. Do we have anyone in Zoom?
I don't have anyone on Zoom.
Okay, do we have any council member comments? Mayor Pro Tem?
I actually forgot to make a comment on an item on consent, so I apologize for that, but I'm going to go ahead and make the comment. It's not a big deal, so hopefully my colleagues will be okay with this. It's regarding 4D, the public housekeeping organization item that was moved to consent. I was really concerned that we only got one proposal. I think when we send out RFPs, we should do whatever we can to get multiple proposals, but in this case, we got one. But in this case, we're under a deadline, so my request is not that we extend anything because we need to meet our deadline, but I would like to see the RFP opened up again in 6 months for the second round so more potential organizations can apply for that. Is that okay with everyone?
Sure.
Yes, and that was the plan. We only received
great.
the one proposal. We wanted as many as we could, but we got one. But we didn't want to delay this because there is the July 1 start date. So we can certainly send it out again in 6 months and add additional
Great, thank you.
providers.
Any other council member comments?
Yes, I forgot to say.
Councilmember Erickson.
I forgot to say that at the Contract Cities Association, I was appointed as vice chair of the legislative committee, and I want to thank. I think you're off e-board now. No, you're still on it. Current e-board member and colleague, Councilmember Horvath, for getting me involved. I've really enjoyed that committee, and now I'm the vice chair. So thank you for that introduction.
Yes, any other comments? No other comments, then we will adjourn until Monday, June 6th, 6 p.m., regular meeting, West Hollywood Park Council Chambers. We're adjourned.
Well, you were worthless. I'm just kidding.
The city of West Hollywood